Hi loves, just to let you know, these videos are compilation videos from my main channel, Coffee and Cults. Today's video, we're going to be discussing everything about two of the biggest teen shows of all time, That 70's Show and Gossip Girl. And of course, both of the stars of these shows went on to have very big careers. And anyone from my main channel will know I have done a lot of videos on the That 70's Show cast. I am planning on doing a master compilation with all of those videos on, so look out for that in the future. This video, it does have the main story about the cast and the show and all the behind the scenes, as does the Gossip Girl one. And if you are interested in any of those standalone videos or any other pop culture deep dives, I will leave my main channel linked below, Coffee and Cults, along with my other channel, Coffee, Cults and Cats, where we talk more about current pop culture stories. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get into everything That 70's Show and Gossip Girl.
On the surface, Hollywood looks like a beautiful, happy place where people's dreams of fame and fortune come true. However, when you scratch below the surface of Hollywood's perfect veneer, you'll find people partaking in manipulation, heinous acts, and horrible crimes. These individuals thought their money, influence, fame, and power would always protect them, but thankfully, they've been proven wrong. Over the last decade, we've seen many Hollywood stars have their masks ripped off to reveal the monster they always were deep down inside. Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby, and many, many more, the latest of which is Danny Masterson. Masterson starred on one of the most popular shows of the late 90s and early 2000s, That 70's Show. With 8 seasons, the show dominated Fox for almost a decade, and when That 70's Show premiered in 1998, it made stars out of its completely unknown young cast. Over the last 25 years, the That 70's Show cast has not only stuck around and consistently worked, which is no easy feat in Hollywood, but the entire cast has been very successful, with some of its members even making it on to the coveted A+ list and becoming widely recognized around the globe. But despite their success on both the small and silver screen, the cast of That 70's Show have been surrounded in controversies, with nearly every single cast member, bar one, being caught up in multiple headline-making scandals. So today, we're going to discuss all the crimes, cheating, predatory behavior, cults, scandals, and controversies that surround the cast of That 70's Show. We'll be diving into the dark and twisty history and current day activities of Danny Masterson, Ashton Kutcher, Wilmer Valderrama, Laura Prepon, and Mila Kunis, with Topher Grace being the sole cast member not to be mired in controversy at any point over the last 2.5 decades. In this video, we'll be taking a look back at the dark history on the set of That 70's Show itself and the blind eye turned by many people when it came to the stars of the show itself, in particular Danny Masterson, Ashton Kutcher, and Wilmer Valderrama. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, and let's dive in to the dark and twisted world of That 70's Show. Viewer discretion advised for this video, where we discuss extremely serious topics involving SA. Outside of court convictions, everything is alleged, and this video is for entertainment purposes. It's the product of discussions with sources who knew, worked, and interacted with the cast of That 70's Show, and also the product of research, with sources available in the pinned comment. That 70's Show was, unsurprisingly, set during the 1970s. It was a typical show about high school friends and later young adults hanging out and trying to find their way through life. The show starred Mila Kunis, Laura Prepon, Topher Grace, Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama. There also was Deborah Jo Rupp and Kurtwood Smith starring as the parents of Topher Grace's character. All of the series regulars stuck around through all 8 seasons, with the exception of Topher Grace, who left at the end of the 7th season, and Ashton Kutcher, who only guest starred in the 8th season. However, Grace and Kutcher did return for the series finale at the end of the 8th season. During the show's run, there was an attempt at a British remake called Days Like These.
The party has reached its critical mass. In 10 minutes' time, there will be no more beer theft opportunities.
Yes, but if my dad catches me nicking booze, he will kill me.
Eric, I'm willing to take that risk.
There was also an attempt at a That 80s Show.
That 80s Show, a new comedy series coming this January to Fox.
But both of these failed miserably. Last year, there was a Netflix sequel launch titled That 90s Show. That 90s Show saw Deborah Jo Rupp and Kurtwood Smith return as the foremans in That 90s Show, and all of the previous That 70s Show cast, with the exception of Danny Masterson, returned for a few scenes in the first season of That 90s Show.
See about my boy here, huh? Look at this guy. Look at him. Look at him. He's got his dad's looks and his mom's braids. Like straight A's last year.
Sweet Lord, it's evolving.
That 90s Show got lukewarm reviews, but proved popular enough to get a second season, which is currently being filmed. The show did not address why Masterson's character was not featured, nor was it mentioned at all throughout the first run of the series. While That 70s Show was a very successful show and on screen for nearly a decade, the show's cast and their reputations have been mired in controversies, scandal, criminal behavior, assaults, lies, cheating, and darkness. So we'll primarily be talking about each of the cast and the controversies surrounding them, because even though this show ended almost 20 years ago, the That 70s Show cast are still making headlines. And lately, those headlines have been anything but good. As always, my sources are in the pinned comment, although please keep in mind some information has been supplied to me via people who have had first and second-hand accounts with members of the That 70s Show cast, the vast majority of which are experiences with Ashton Kutcher, Wilmer Valderrama, and Danny Masterson. We're going to start off by talking about what was going on when the show was on, what the cast was up to, some of the controversies during the late 90s and early 2000s, and then we'll be moving into specific members of the cast via the chapters which are timestamped below in the description. That 70s Show was an enormous success, and with 200 episodes, it was made Fox's second longest running live action sitcom ever, behind Married with Children, though it didn't quite have the same rating success as Married with Children. The premiere of the first season in 1998 gained a viewership of close to 12 million. The cast at the time, with the exception of Danny Masterson, was completely unknown, with many of them having done no professional acting whatsoever. Ashton Kutcher had just moved to Hollywood from Iowa and was a model. Laura Prepon was from New Jersey and she had no acting experience but was also a model. Wilmer Valderrama was in between his junior and senior year of high school, and Topher Grace actually only got the part because he appeared in a school play with the daughter of series creator Bonnie and Terry Turner. Mila Kunis had had a little bit of experience, with one of her prior projects being the Disney Channel movie Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. This was the third in the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids franchise, and Kunis starred alongside Smallville's Allison Mack, who now is more famous for being a high-ranking member of the cult NXIVM. I do have a video about Mack and NXIVM if you want to know more about that.
Okay, so Allison Mack,
Yes.
I used to audition against, and my manager and I were just talking about like the different actors that I used to audition against when I was like 14, right? 11, 12, 13, 14. And I was like, I wonder where they're at now. Like, where are half these people? So I started Googling some of the actresses that I used to audition against, one of them being Allison Mack. And I Googled her and I was like, what is this NXIVM thing? And I started watching the videos on YouTube. This is before anything was on the news. And I was like, yo, she's in a cult. and so I
You're
started
actually talking to the TV. I'm imagining you like just literally talking to your.
I mean, I wish. I was more like, Cammy, she's in the cult.
Masterson was the oldest of the group and had done a lot of commercials as a child and teenager. He got his first movie role in Beethoven 2, and he did a few more shows throughout the mid-90s, like Roseanne and the movie Face Off. Face Off starred fellow Scientologist John Travolta, and Danny Masterson's part seemed to predict his future crimes. In the late 90s, Danny continued on multi-episode arcs on shows like Party of Five and Sybil. When it comes to how everyone got on on behind the scenes, Masterson was the oldest of the 6 kids on that 70s show, and in the first season, he sat them all down and told them that they had a good thing going with the success of the show, and this was his shot, and nobody better ruin it for him by being an idiot in the press. This was spun as a very positive, look how great Danny is, but in reality, it wasn't as wholesome as it seems. Topher Grace got a lot of stick over the years for not wanting to be friends with the cast. Everyone else was friends, and Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama were especially close, going out and partying together every week. The other people associated with the shows, like creators and producers, tried to play it like Topher was a homebody and just wasn't into going out with the cast. But 20 years later, that seems to be very untrue, because for 20 years, Topher Grace has been making friends with plenty of the cast on movies and TV shows that he's worked on. He's gone out lots. It just seems like he didn't want to be friends and go out with Danny Masterson. And for this reason, he didn't socialize with the cast because they were all so close to Danny Masterson. Many people have spoken about Masterson, who is a Scientologist, and how he ran his own little cult on the set of that 70s show. The rest of the cast was so close to Danny Masterson that they would go every year to the Scientology Christmas event and other fundraisers and perform at the Scientology Celebrity Center.
I know he may not be the best looking guy in the world, or the richest, or the smartest, and you can't really read his handwriting, but none of that matters to me.
You know, I can hear what you're saying.
Danny Masterson grew up in Scientology and his entire family is Scientologists. His younger brother, Chris Masterson, who also starred on a hit Fox show, Malcolm in the Middle, ended up dating Danny's co-star, Laura Prepon, and she ended up being inducted into Scientology because she was so close with the Mastersons. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis aren't Scientologists, but they are extremely wrapped up in Scientology. They have many, many friends that are Scientologists. They go to scores of Scientology events, weddings. They are constantly surrounding themselves with Scientologists, even people who work with them and work for them, which a lot of Scientologists have explained to me wouldn't be allowed without the explicit permission of Scientology. And a lot of people are convinced that Scientology has a lot of dirt on Ashton and Mila, and we'll discuss that later in the video. From the very early days of that 70s show, Kutcher and Masterson have described themselves as best friends and have worked on other projects together too. They are very close, and of course, because Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis are now married, they're kind of a little trio a lot of the time. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, when they worked on the show, they apparently absolutely despised each other. This could be the age difference, because one of the most known trivia facts about that 70s show is that Mila Kunis was actually 14 when she was cast on the show. They did want 18-plus-year-olds to be cast, and when they asked Mila how old she was, she said she was going to be 18, but just didn't specify when she was going to be 18. I think everyone who knows anything about that 70s show knows that story, but now people are looking back and seeing the problematic things about it, because at the time they even were doing interviews that years later they come across completely inappropriate, with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis appearing on the Rosie O'Donnell show and talking about Mila's first kiss, where Masterson was placing a bet that Ashton Kutcher couldn't stick his tongue down Mila's throat, which, considering she was 14 and he was 19, it doesn't look the greatest. And even a lot of the people associated with the shows, like producers, they are now even saying that on some special editions and True Hollywood Story type things that have come out over the last 10 years or so.
She was actually working in the back of the Vista Cruiser with Kelso after a concert in the pilot.
You know, knowing that now, it just looks unseemly that there's Ashton Kutcher with his hands all over this 14-year-old. It's like we're doing boogie nights. It's really weird.
There's a lot of interviews that have been scrubbed, but there's a few remaining of just little things that Mila Kunis says that really point towards inappropriate behavior on set. And Chrissy Bixler, who is Danny Masterson's ex-girlfriend of nearly his entire run on that 70s show and one of his accusers, she said that Mila Kunis went through a lot on that set because she was surrounded with Danny Masterson, Ashton Kutcher, and Wilmer Valderrama at the height of their fame. Even Kunis herself stated a few bizarre things in interviews. Although many of these interviews have been scrubbed from the internet, you can see echoes of the treatment Kunis endured on the set of that 70s show in her behavior today. For example, there was an interview from several years ago where Kunis was being interviewed by James Franco. In the interview, they discussed Franco's new movie, This Is the End, that came out in 2013. Franco and Kunis discussed the apprehension of a then 20-year-old Emma Watson to do a scene she was uncomfortable with involving the on average decade older group of Seth Rogen, Danny McBride, James Franco, Jonah Hill, Craig Robinson, and Channing Tatum. Watson was so uncomfortable that she walked off the set. Seth Rogen, who also directed the film, later came out and said Watson was right and they changed the scene. He said there was no bad blood, she promoted the film despite only having a minor cameo type role, and everyone was very thankful to have her there as this was one of her first handful of films after the Harry Potter series. It came out just after The Perks of Being a Wallflower and The Bling Ring. When interviewing Kunis, Franco discusses Watson being uncomfortable with the scene and walking off. Although Franco does not name Watson, it is extremely obvious who he is talking about because he names the film and because there are no other women in the main cast. Mila Kunis talks poorly about Emma Watson and uses herself, Mila, as an example of a woman who would just put up with any behavior. It seems very obvious that Kunis's response to Franco and her general take throughout this interview and many other interviews I've seen, it seems as though Kunis has been conditioned by that 70s show to just turn a blind eye and be the cool girl. Kunis has learned that if she were to say no to something, express her limits, or discuss her desire to not be around certain behavior, she would be labeled a bitch and spoken about the exact same way that she and Franco are speaking about Emma Watson. I want to share a clip from my favorite podcast, Do We Know Them, where the hosts Lily Morrison and Jessie Smiles discuss Kunis's behavior and her seeming desire to not kick up a fuss and forever be known as the cool girl above all else.
Think about even in, like, as a non-actor or celebrity TV show setting. If you're a girl around a bunch of guys and they're making a bunch of crude jokes and you're like the butt of the joke, you aren't going to be like, oh my God, fuck all of you, stop saying that. Because the second you kind of fight back, then you're the bitch and everyone is gonna just go harder and hate you. So in my eyes, it's very clear that Mila really leaned into being like the guy's girl. And she's like this cool, she'll roll with the punches, she's cool with whatever. But she had to be, because the second she wouldn't have been, she would have been the difficult actress. It would have isolated her, I think, from a lot of the cast, and instead she was like one of the guys.
You know what makes me really sad about what you just said? It just sparked a memory of an interview with Ashton Kutcher where he was talking about Mila Kunis as a mother. What he described was that Mila Kunis was such a good mom, which that part's great. His reasoning was that he would get home after like a long day where she would be alone with the kids, and he would ask her like, how was everything? And she would just tell him like, everything was great. And he said that he would know that everything wasn't awesome, but that it's just so great that like she would describe it as such. Like she would be so like, oh, like I handled everything, but like he knew she went through shit, but like she won't even tell me about it because she's such a good mom, like type of vibe.
I mean, that's your partner, and that's the person that's going to be able to relate to your frustrations the most, because hopefully they're also doing the same kind of things and they're going to be able to understand where you're coming from.
But you just saying that reminded me of that, because I just feel like she probably just tried to do that in every aspect of her life, just be the person that like nothing's wrong, like everything's fine. And I'm not trying to give her an out for writing a letter for Danny Masterson. It's just like interesting to see her journey, because it is kind of sad.
Because honestly, Kunis was so young, Laura Prepon was dating Chris Masterson, Danny's brother, and Topher Grace did not want to associate with Danny Masterson and his posse any more than he had to at work, this left the trio of Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama. This trio, led by Masterson, was infamous throughout Hollywood for their inappropriate behavior in the late 90s and early 2000s. A lot of their poor behavior is not well documented at all because this was taking place long before people carried around 4K cameras in their pockets.
Whole thing, and this was like pre-TMZ, pre-cell phone camera. So you could like go out. But nobody was going to take your pictures, so you could really wow out, and nobody would know what you did last night.
Also, the way that Hollywood dealt with gossip and stories was very different back then. There really only were things like blinds on one side, and then on the other side, very carefully curated PR like Us Weekly and People magazine, and then shows that their primary reason was marketing like Entertainment Tonight. While websites, forums, and blogs were starting to pop up, they were only used by a tiny amount of people. Of course, we also didn't have any form of social media, so there was no finding anything out from other people, other accounts, celebrities, anonymous accounts, and you just had to really rely on what was being reported to you. Kutcher, Masterson, and Valderrama were all known for partying and being frequent guests of many nightclubs throughout Hollywood. Over the years, they all developed terrible reputations due to their behavior, with Ashton Kutcher frequently cheating on his then-wife, Demi Moore, including cheating on her many times at Masterson's house, which after years of speculation was finally confirmed by Demi Moore herself in her 2019 memoir, Inside Out. Wilmer Valderrama became infamous for dating underage Hollywood it girls like Mandy Moore, Lindsay Lohan, and later on, Demi Lovato. Danny Masterson didn't just have a bad reputation. He had a horrifyingly dark reputation that we'll get into much more later in the video. I've heard a lot of stories about this trio, but especially about Danny Masterson. I spoke to countless people in the industry, people who've worked on the shows that they've worked on, people who are friends with people in their circles. There's also people that I know from the celebrity poker events, like Poker Stars and Full Tilt, that these three attended. And there are scores and scores of people who have written to me after my last Danny Masterson video. And all of these stories are extremely consistent, with everyone stating it was widely known that Danny Masterson was a dangerous, dangerous person, and women tried to warn one another to never accept a drink from him, to never go to his house, and to never be alone with Danny Masterson. Before we get into Danny Masterson's crimes, Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, I want to talk about Wilmer Valderrama and his pattern of dating underage girls. Wilmer has had 3 very public relationships with underage girls, or he started dating them when they were underage, and the first of these was Mandy Moore. I'm sure most people who follow anything about the That 70's Show cast, or even if you don't, you could have heard of this. There was a Howard Stern interview that Wilmer Valderrama did, and he was really vulgar about Mandy Moore. And I understand that Howard Stern is not the sort of show that you go on to talk about puppies and random things like you would on Ellen, but he got really graphical on Howard Stern and also just blatantly lied, according to Mandy Moore anyway. So Wilmer was saying he was the first to sleep with Mandy, and then Mandy later came on the show and said that wasn't true at all, and she was really taken aback by it all because they were still pretty friendly. He met Mandy Moore at a photo shoot and started dating when she was 15 and he was almost 20. So that was his first relationship. The second is, well, actually probably the second and the third are the most well known, probably the second one most well known to anyone who's a millennial, but he dated Lindsay Lohan. And at the time that he dated Lindsay, it was not only at the height of that 70s show fame, it was at the height of Lindsay Lohan's fame. And she was at one stage one of the most famous people in the world. It was when Mean Girls was coming out, Herbie Fully Loaded, and there just was a lot of buzz around her for her going out and partying with Paris Hilton and Britney Spears. And this was when things like TMZ and stuff was starting to get really big, and they would go out hoping that there was going to be some incident with Lindsay Lohan or Britney or Paris Hilton. And the media at this time was really, really cutthroat. So Lindsay was 17 when they started dating, and at the time, you know, there's interviews on things like Ellen where Lindsay would say, "Oh no, we're just really good friends," and she had this kind of trained PR line that, "Oh no, we're really good friends and he's like a brother to me." And then all of a sudden, at the stroke of midnight on her 18th birthday, they started dating. But of course, years later, it's all come out that they actually were dating when she was 17, and they didn't date for very long. And when they broke up, Lindsay wrote a breakup song about Wilmer and recorded it in his house. So he was 25 at the time that he was dating 17-year-old Lindsay Lohan. And she was, as I said, really going through a lot, especially with her parents, who are just tabloid fodder a lot of the time for their antics. And I actually know it's not like a publicity thing. I know at least her dad is certainly the way the media portrays him, because there was a event that I was working at once where, you can probably look this up on Google. I'll share it on the screen if I find the articles. But there was an event at this place in Tampa called the Tahitian Inn.
So I'm on my way to Starbucks to continue editing the video that you're watching right now, this section. And I was like, oh, I'm going to stop at Extreme Juice, which is like this really, really good natural smoothie place in South Tampa, and it happens to be right next to the Tahitian Inn. So I was like, I'm gonna get some funny little b-roll to put in here for this random story that I've inserted into this video. But I just wanted to show you I'm really boots on the ground, getting to the root of these stories for you guys. Obviously I'm joking, but I just thought it was funny to include this.
And Michael Lohan had been arrested previously in the week for getting into a fight with his 20-something-year-old girlfriend, who was at the time just a few years older than Lindsay. And then this was a few days later, he was at the Tahitian Inn, which is in South Tampa on Del Mabry, and he ended up jumping out of the third story of the hotel because he was trying to get away from the police. And obviously the police caught him, he was arrested, and when he was coming out of the jail, I remember there was lots of Tampa sort of newspapers and things all selling pictures to TMZ, and there was this little week of Michael Lohan just causing chaos throughout Tampa. Lindsay was dealing with this in the press, and then she was in a relationship with Wilmer, and a lot of people also said that Ashton and Lindsay were actually together, or at least sleeping together, before Wilmer and Lindsay got together. And then when Wilmer and Lindsay were dating, she actually went on that 70s show. And when Lindsay went on that 70s show when she was dating Wilmer, it was just this bad period in her life where she was even hospitalized because the partying and all the projects and just, I think, the pressure in her family all kind of came to a head, and it just seemed to be like she was in a very vulnerable situation. And again, she was only 17 when she and Wilmer were together. But there is another casualty to Wilder Valderrama, and that is Demi Lovato. This was the biggest gap by far because there was 12 years between them. And Demi Lovato, of course, is a really famous singer and actress from Disney Channel. And Wilmer used the exact same line with her. It was, "Oh, I'm 17, nothing can happen, we're really good friends." And then all of a sudden, again, at the stroke of midnight, they started dating. And Demi, again, was someone that was going through a very hard time. She was very vulnerable. She's been very open about her substance abuse. And there's a lot of stories about how poorly Wilmer treated Demi, things like saying she was more fun when she wasn't sober, and a lot of cheating allegations. But even when you're just looking at the age that Demi was when she was dating Wilmer, he was 29 and she was 17. But 17 and 29 is just such an astronomical difference. I mean, if someone was 37 and 49, that is not as different as 17 and 29, because you're still kind of in the same lifetimes and life experiences. And I mean, I don't know at 29, I wouldn't even want to be around 17-year-olds. So I find it just really bizarre. And a lot of people, they bring up these age gap relationships, and a lot of the time it is the female who is younger, but there is a lot of instances where it's the other way around too. And I think that's just as inappropriate. The person that comes to mind is Aaron Taylor Johnson and Sam Taylor Johnson. That is a similar thing, or actually she was even older than Wilmer. So I just don't ever see what someone who is well into adulthood has in common with a teenager that should be in high school. 6 years after they broke up, Demi ended up releasing a song called 29, and most people interpreted it as a condemnation of Wilmer and their relationship. And when Demi was asked about the references, she just said that she thought the song says it all. Just putting this little clip in here to say, obviously, I would love to put the song in here because it is so blatantly about Wilmer, and Demi is obviously saying how differently she feels now that she's 29 and sees how problematic the relationship was. But just because of YouTube copyright, you can't even put in like 2 seconds of a song, otherwise it'll be claimed like that. So you'll see lyrics on the screen. That's the best way I can kind of share how obvious this is, that this is about Wilmer, and how inappropriate Demi now realizes the relationship was. If you want to know everything, like all the nitty-gritty details about Danny Masterson, his crime, his trial, I do have an almost 2-hour video going over it all that I will link above in the cards and down below in the pinned comment, but I will go over the general points here. Danny Masterson grew up as a Scientologist in a Scientology family and also in an acting family. He and his brother Chris were child models, and they did a lot of commercials, then moved into TV and film. And when he got that 70's show, that was his big break, and that was what he was most known for. He did consistently work on TV mainly for the following 20 years after that 70's show. He was on a show called Men at Work that was on TBS, and then he was on The Ranch. He and Ashton Kutcher actually executive produced The Ranch together and were looking for a project that they could work on together because they are best friends. He actually was in 2 seasons of The Ranch and then was taken off the show completely. While Masterson was on The Ranch in March 2017, 3 women filed sexual assault charges against Masterson, which prompted an investigation by the LAPD. Through his agent, Masterson denied these allegations, and then a 4th victim came forward. It was at this time that Masterson was then fired from The Ranch as both an actor and as a co-executive producer. Netflix then issued the following statement: "Yesterday was his last day on the show, and production will resume in early 2018 without him." Masterson then stated, "Obviously Obviously, I'm very disappointed in Netflix's decision to write my character off the ranch. Prior to Netflix writing Masterson's character off, there was a controversy that was printed in the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post published an article stating that while at a youth soccer game, one of Masterson's accusers was talking to another parent. This other parent that was talking to one of Masterson's victims was actually Andy Yeatman, a Netflix executive. When Masterson's victim asked Yeatman why Netflix wasn't taking action against Masterson, Yeatman admitted, "We just don't believe them," in reference to the victims. When the story came out, Netflix then fired Yeatman and Masterson. A few weeks after Masterson was fired by Netflix, a fifth woman came forward accusing Masterson of SA, and he was dropped by his agent of over 20 years. In 2019, 2 years later, with the investigation still going on, Leah Remini released the series finale of her show Scientology and the Aftermath, and the entire series finale was about Masterson's victims, and they did the whole story on what Danny Masterson had done to all of the victims that appeared on Leah Remini's show. Finally, after 3 years of investigating, in June 2020, Masterson was charged with raping 3 women, 1 in 2001 and 2 in 2003. The 3 women will be referred to as Jane Doe, as they were referred to in the trial, but they have all revealed themselves in the media now, and I do discuss each of their stories in a lot more depth in my other video. The 3 Jane Does produced on the stand 3 eerily similar stories about the night that Masterson attacked and assaulted them. All 3 Jane Does reported their attacks to Scientology officials as per the rules of Scientology. Scientology does not allow its members to report other Scientologists to the real world authorities. It is an absolute no-no for Scientologists. You need to keep any issues or even crimes, apparently, in Scientology. All the victims were lifelong Scientologists, and they knew if they reported Masterson to the police, they would lose their family, their friends, their jobs, their entire life. But even saying that, one of his victims did take it to the police because she just was so disturbed and going through so much, and Scientology wasn't helping her, so she brought it to the LAPD. Scientology and the LAPD have very close ties, especially funding ties, and there is actually a lawsuit going on now between the Jane Does, and this is against not only Masterson but Scientology, and they're really looking into how everything was fumbled with the LAPD, as obviously when the Jane Doe did report him to the LAPD, he wasn't charged all the way back then. After the prosecution produced all their evidence, all their witnesses, they rested, and the defense basically said nothing. Masterson didn't go on the stand. They did their closing arguments, and the jury went into deliberation. The jury deliberated for 6 days, but one very important point is that in order for Masterson to go to prison, he had to be found guilty on at least 2 of the 3 charges. So if the jury came back and they found him guilty for Jane Doe 1 and non-guilty on 2 and 3, he wouldn't have gone to prison. And the jury didn't know this. So it was quite a high bar that he had to clear in order to go to prison. The jury returned a guilty verdict on 2 of the 3 charges. They were deadlocked on the 3rd charge, which was the charge against Chrissy Bixler, who was Danny Masterson's girlfriend throughout nearly the entire run of that 70's show. After being found guilty, Danny Masterson was immediately remanded into custody, and straight away his family went to work on getting letters for the judge so that they could try and sway the judge to give Danny a lesser sentence. There really was only
two things that they could do with his sentence. He was going to get around 15 years for each of the charges, the guilty verdicts on each of those charges, but they could be done concurrently or consecutively. So either they could be done at the same time and he'd be out in 15 years, or they could be done one after the other, which would mean 30 years in prison. Danny Masterson's family themselves wrote letters and sought out prominent Scientologists and other celebrities to write letters to. In the end, over 50 letters, glowing letters, were sent to the judge on Masterson's behalf, and all of these letters were written after the guilty verdict, after he had been found guilty of these crimes. Of course, all his siblings, Chris, Alana, Will, and Jordan. Alana Masterson, I'm sure a lot of people will recognize her. She was on The Walking Dead, and she's also best friends with Hilary Duff and has been best friends with her for a very, very long time. They also sought out tons of other celebrity Scientologists like Eric Balfour, Giovanni Ribisi, and there was also a lot of cast members from that 70s show. Deborah Jo Rupp and Kurtwood Smith both wrote absolutely glowing letters for Masterson. And I'm sure that a lot of people are aware Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis destroyed their reputations by writing glowing letters for Masterson. So before we get into the juicy chapter about Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, Danny Masterson's sentencing, Ashton and Mila's letters, we're going to discuss the other Scientologist in the main cast of that 70s show. This person was also a part of the Masterson family for almost a decade, that being Laura Prepon. So in this chapter, I want to talk about Laura Prepon, and that also means discussing Chris Masterson, who is Danny Masterson's younger brother. Chris Masterson was also on a hit Fox show. He was the oldest brother Francis on Malcolm in the Middle, that was on at the same time to that 70s show. And Chris and Laura actually dated for 9 years. They were together through the entire run of that 70s show, and Laura was very close to the Masterson family. She was so close to them that she ended up converting to Scientology for Chris Masterson and with the influence of Danny Masterson. I always found it quite interesting that Chris Masterson was on Malcolm in the Middle. He was the oldest brother, and the rest of the brothers on that show were quite young. And Danny was on a show where he was the oldest of the kids, but most of them, with the exception of Mila Kunis, obviously, who was 14, the rest of them were like 19, 20, 21, and Danny was a few years older, but Danny managed to get Laura converted. A lot of people say that Deborah Jo Rupp and Kurtwood Smith are Scientologists, but they have never come out and said that. But there's a lot of people that have told me that, including former Scientologists. And also, even though they aren't Scientologists, Ashton and Mila have so many ties to Scientology. They have so many friends that are Scientologists. They are constantly at Scientology weddings and events, and they even have people that work for them who are Scientologists, which couldn't go on without the explicit permission of Scientology. And obviously, Danny Masterson is Ashton Kutcher's best friend of over 20 years. So a lot of people are wrapped up in Scientology from that 70s show, but absolutely no one, even though it was a younger cast, was wrapped up in it from Malcolm in the Middle. And a lot of people, including someone I spoke to who worked on that show, said that it's all really thanks to Bryan Cranston, who was very protective over the kids. And I mean, Bryan Cranston, please tell me someone who doesn't like him. He seems to be a really great guy. And I have a little bit of experience with Aaron Paul because he used to attend a lot of the poker events that I was involved in through work. And they just seem like great people and they're great actors too. But Brian apparently, and producers of the shows, really protected the kids. Also, Chris Masterson, his storylines, anyone who watched Malcolm in the Middle, I'm sure they know this, that his storylines were very separate from the family. So his character was like away at military school, and then he had storylines that he wasn't really with the rest of the cast. So it probably is a mix of both of those things. But Chris and Laura did end up dating quite early on that 70s show. And Chris himself has really bad reputation in Hollywood too. A lot of people claim that he has ties to Bryan Singer, allegedly, and he doesn't really act anymore. He is a DJ. He goes by Chris Kennedy, which is his middle name, but yeah, he just has a very bad reputation as well, and allegedly treated Laura like garbage, cheated on her a lot, very typical Hollywood stuff. But Laura also, a lot of people, when the letters for Danny Masterson came out and Ashton, Mila, Kurtwood Smith, and Deborah Jo Rupp all wrote letters for him, a lot of people were obviously like, Topher Grace is the king, and there was no letter from Wilmer and Laura, even though they were both really close to Danny Masterson and both have claimed him as family at stages. Although Laura didn't write a letter, she still did get quite a knock in the media because it did come out that apparently Laura had tried to intimidate one of the victims of Danny Masterson. This was years ago when Jane Doe 1 had reported Danny to Scientology. The Jane Does reported the assault and attacks to Scientology because Scientologists aren't supposed to report other Scientologists to the WOG, which is what they use to mean the real world, aka not Scientologists. You're not supposed to report Scientologists to WOG authorities. So that's why the Jane Does turned Danny into the Scientology authorities. So when they did this years and years ago, like when the actual attacks and assaults happened, Scientology ended up telling them that they had to go through this intense auditing and interrogations. And the reason that they do this is because Scientologists don't believe that you can be a victim. They believe that everything that happens to you is your fault. Even if you're hit by a car when you're walking down the street, that is your fault. You did something to deserve this. And that is why they had the Jane Does pay $15,000 to take these intense auditing and basically interrogation courses. And Jane Doe 1 was taking this because she had to at the Scientology Celebrity Center, and Danny Masterson also had to take one because of what he did, and his was taking place at the Scientology Celebrity Center too. Jane Doe 1 had to go there every single day for this, and she was constantly paranoid about seeing Danny there, obviously. So there was one day that she was going to her class like normal, and she ended up bumping into Laura Prepon in the car park. And the source that reported this ended up saying she saw Prepon in the parking lot, and Laura was asking her very pointedly, "Why are you at the Celebrity Center? What are you doing here? Why aren't you out with the crowd?" The source that reported this then went on to say that Jane Doe 1 knew exactly what was going on. She knew that she had to act fine, she had to act chipper, like nothing was wrong, and she couldn't say why she was really there. Laura then went on to ask her if she was upset with Danny, and Jane Doe 1 had to say no. The source then said that if Jane Doe 1 had answered in any sort of negative way or acted curt or rude, Laura could have written her up and it would mean a declare order, and that then Jane Doe 1 would be excommunicated from Scientology, which would force her to be disconnected from her family, friends, and her life. It's not unusual at all for Scientologists to be written up, even just for acting rude to someone that's higher up, and the celebrities are always the top but Jane Doe 1 had actually just been written up a few months before, so she knew that if Laura wrote her up that she'd be toast, and not only would her family not speak to her friends, she would have to leave her entire life, as Jane Doe 1 grew up in Scientology. Jane Doe 1 said that she knew Laura well before this, and these were not the kind of questions that she would just simply ask a friend. Jane Doe 1 said that her encounter with Laura Prepon in the parking lot at the Hollywood Celebrity Center was one of the most difficult things she had to go through during her entire ordeal, and that there was no doubt in her mind that Laura had been sent there to trip her up on Masterson's behalf. One final thing to say about Chris is that he and his mother were the people who actually contributed to Danny's $3.3 million bail so that he could be out on bond while his trial was happening. Laura and Chris broke up in 2007, and Laura then went on to date Scott Michael Foster. They broke up in 2013, and then she started dating her now husband, Ben Foster. Kind of funny, the last two boyfriends had the same last name. And Ben Foster, according to him and to Laura, was never a Scientologist, but according to Aaron Smith Levin and a lot of his sources who grew up as Scientologists in Los Angeles, they claim that Ben Foster is, or at least was, a Scientologist. They got married and had 2 kids, and then in 2020, Laura Prepon actually came out and said that she was no longer a Scientologist and hadn't been a Scientologist for about 5 years. The quote that she gave was very... I don't even know how to describe it. It was wishy-washy, like not very definitive. It's not as if she said, I am no longer affiliated with Scientology. I regret it. I think it was a harmful thing. She just said, I'm no longer practicing that, and I've practiced lots of religions throughout my life. So having read this, a lot of people were wondering, is this definitive? Is she just saying she's doing a lot of different religions? And Aaron Smith Levin, again, his channel Growing Up in Scientology is great for everything to know about Scientology, and it's linked in my sources below. But Aaron went on to say that this would actually be a really huge deal to Scientology, the fact that a celebrity has said they have broken away from the church, and this alone would kind of make Laura against Scientology, and Scientology would probably be really, really angry that she had done this in such a public way. So a lot of people like Leah Remini, obviously, who's super brave and speaking out about how bad Scientology is. Laura just throwing out like a random line 5 years after she's left. I know people like Leah expect and want more from her, which I think is reasonable because she was involved in a harmful cult for 10 years and on the front of their magazines influencing people to join and to stay in it. And I know that, some people will say you can't live your life like a celebrity, but you can't deny the influence that these celebrities have on Scientology and just on everything. So by Laura not saying anything at all really about Scientology, that bled into the whole Danny Masterson situation. And despite being basically in their family for 10 years, she has said nothing at all about Danny Masterson, about his crimes, about the victims, nothing at all. And on the other side, you can say, hey, good, at least she didn't write a letter. At least she didn't try and get him less time in prison for these awful crimes. And on the other side of the other side, you can say, she's married, she has 2 young kids. She probably doesn't want to open up a can of worms speaking about any of this, but as well, she was a part of this for 10 years, and a lot of people think that she should say something. So let me know in the comments what you think about that, because I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and I'd be really interested to hear especially what you think about Laura Prepon and whether she should say something or not.
G and I just interrupting for 10 seconds just to say, if you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing. If not, no worries, check out one of my other videos, but we don't do any sponsorship on this channel, so subscribing is the best way to support G and I. Thanks so much for your time. Back to the video. So from where we left off discussing Danny Masterson earlier, he has been found guilty, he's been remanded into custody, and his family and lawyers are going to work getting letters to try and vouch for him and to sway the judge into giving him leniency when it comes to his sentence. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis were the biggest names on this list of 50 letters by far, and it seems incredible that they didn't double check what Masterson's lawyers were telling them, because when the letters were being written and they were asking people, Masterson's lawyers were entering the letters under seal, which means that if that was granted, the judge would only see them and the letters wouldn't be made public. But of course, when they put this request in, the judge denied it, and then the letters were made available to everyone like everything else. And I just don't understand why you wouldn't check that with so much on the line. But also, they are incredibly rich celebrities who have dozens and dozens and dozens of staff members, including very expensive, and I'm sure some of the best lawyers on retainer. So why wouldn't you at least check? But it's obvious that there wasn't a lot of checking going on with anything that was said in these letters, because they are riddled with spelling and grammar errors, but also they are riddled with lies, because basically nothing in them is true. From them portraying Danny Masterson as this great older brother figure and their own interviews from the past contradicting that, there's also just blatant lying, like saying how he was this great hero for firefighters that were injured on 9/11. That isn't true either. Basically, Danny Masterson created this program that was a detoxification program for 9/11 firefighters, and it wasn't any help at all. It was to recruit them into Scientology, and it also harmed the people that were in it, because this detoxification program followed L. Ron Hubbard's medicine is bad and basically told all these firefighters, throw away your inhalers, throw away your medicine. You just need to come to this detoxification center, where they were trying to recruit them, and they didn't do anything for them. People started getting sicker, and they also started giving them some sort of like supplement that was making people really ill. So he didn't help anyone. He actually harmed 9/11 firefighters, and Wilmer Valderrama and a couple of other people involved with that 70's show were all wrapped up in this too. Speaking of Masterson being anti-medication, in Ashton and Mila's letters, they also describe him as anti-drug, and how he was this great older brother figure that was always, looking out for them and being anti-drug, and he was why they didn't end up doing drugs, which according to multiple sources, they allegedly have partaken in plenty of substance. But also, it is very common knowledge that Danny Masterson is an alcoholic, and he, I guess, just doesn't see alcohol as a drug. He also allegedly takes sleeping pills, but says other people shouldn't be taking antidepressants, and he also says diseases are in the mind, so he doesn't believe in medication for anything at all. But obviously for himself, it's fine.
And moved to Los Angeles. Danny Masterson on my show was
very anti-drugs.
Very anti-drugs.
Yes.
Like all Scientologists that I know are like super anti-drugs.
Yeah.
And so
pro cigarettes and booze, but anti.
Yes. And so his big thing to the whole cast on 70's. He was like kind of my mentor when I got my big brother when I got here.
Because he's done a ton of stuff, right? Like he's been acting since he was a kid.
Yeah. So, and he was like, nobody on this set is doing drugs. That's it. Like, and if you were at a party and someone was there, they would kick them out. Like, he was that vigilant about it.
Yes.
And I was like,
well, because I believe too, the theory behind it, as I understand it, is from the Scientology perspective, is people on drugs make your environment dangerous. right?
Yes.
Okay, so I can understand the logic.
And there's certain drugs that are stored in your fat cells, which then ultimately long-term have. Right. There's some bending of it.
Suffice to say, your mentor took a hard line on drugs.
And so I didn't do drugs. I drank like a fish.
He also has been known to drive under the influence a lot. And when you are a regular person, that's a really selfish decision, because obviously you can go out and harm innocent people on the road. But when you are a rich Hollywood celebrity that has endless money, and also you have access to drivers and chauffeurs and whatever you want, that just, I mean, it's insane that someone would do that. And there's audio of people admitting being in cars with Danny Masterson under the influence.
Can I say really one funny thing? Because during this whole period where you were taking me under your wing and introducing me to your friendship circle, I ended up in a car one night with Danny, and we were driving, and he goes, "You don't drink, huh?" And I go, No, I don't drink, but I do drugs." And then he gave me quite a long-winded lecture about it. But he was also driving the car hammered. I think the statute of limitations, this was 15 years ago. I think I can say this now. He was hammered driving the car, and I thought, a little ironic. Yeah, it's great.
The backlash that Ashton and Mila got for these letters was immediate. And they came out months ago, these letters, in September. And I mean, here we are, the very end of January, start of February, and people still are really just raging about it, and I don't think it's gonna go away anytime soon. They immediately rushed out this apology video, which it honestly looks as though they are being held against their will and being told to do this apology video, which just made the situation even worse, if you can believe that. Also, anyone who watches The Boys probably got a laugh out of this, because last season there was a clip of them where they're trying to like poke fun at when Gal Gadot and all those other celebrities during the pandemic did that Imagine song, and there's a scene of them, just, it's very quick, of them filming, and they use the same background. Little did they know that they'd be filming their own apology video with that same background, and they probably chose that background so as not to showcase their mega mansion in their apology video. As I said, the apology video made the situation even worse, and at the end they start this generic, oh, our heart goes out to anyone who's been a victim of SA, when the both of them know each and every one of the victims. And even if they had just used that moment to say the victims' names and say, "We're sorry" to them, it actually probably would have maybe not, resolved everything, but it would have helped a little bit. But they, with this video, just literally poured gasoline on a fire. One of Masterson's victims, Chrissy Bixler, did actually put out a couple of stories in relation to Ashton and Mila's letter and apology video. Now, Chrissy Bixler was Danny Masterson's girlfriend throughout nearly the entire run of that 70's show, and she knows Ashton and Mila very well. The story Chrissy put out called Ashton just as sick as his mentor, and she went on to reference a date which Aaron from Growing Up in Scientology then has gone on to explain the whole story around what Chrissy was referring to, because Aaron actually knows Chrissy and the other victims. And basically, Ashton, this is, way back when he was on that 70's show in the early days of his fame, and he was going to pick up his date, a woman named Ashley Elleron. And he was running late. Again, this is back in the early 2000s, so it's before cell phones and everything. And he arrived late, went up to the door, knocked, apparently no answer. And according to him, he looked in through the window and saw that there was what he said looked like a red wine stain on the ground. And then he decided to leave, went to the party he was supposed to go to, and just thought, oh, she's mad that I was late and she's, gone and done something else. Ashley, unfortunately, was the victim of the Hollywood Ripper, and that is why she didn't answer the door. Ashton himself testified to what I've just told you, that he went, peeked in the window, didn't see her, and left. But Chrissy Bixler said this wasn't what happened. Allegedly, according to Chrissy Bixler and Aaron from Growing Up in Scientology, Ashton Kutcher entered the house, saw Ashley Elleron's body, and then went out to his car and phoned Danny Masterson. And then his PR people, a plan was concocted, and basically they told Ashton, if you call this in, this is all you're ever going to be known for. So go to the party, pretend that, you know, everything's fine and she just didn't answer the door and it'll be all right. Ashton did contact the police the next day and claimed that once he'd heard about what happened, he wanted to let them know that he'd tried to come over the night before because he had obviously touched the door handle, and he said he was worried about his fingerprints being on the door handle. Also, there have been floor plans released of Ashley Elleron's house, and if you look at them from Ashton Kutcher's story, it seems impossible what he is saying, that he has gone up and looked through the window. There's two windows. One, you wouldn't see anything, and then the other one, it's impossible to see what he said he saw, which was blood, but he thought it was red wine on the ground. Also, Chrissy Bixler said she heard the entire phone call because the phone call between Ashton and Danny was on speakerphone, and Chrissy says that she heard the whole plan being concocted.
He opened the door. He walked into the house. You could not see the body on the floor from the entryway to the house. He walked into the house. He looked over to the area where he saw her dead body lying on the floor. She was stabbed like 47 times, covered in blood everywhere. Freaked out, left the house, and for about the next hour, sat in his car outside the house, calling various members of his team for advice on what the hell to do. That 70's show was only a couple years old at this point. Ashton Kutcher was not a household name. They essentially said, this is all you'll be known for. People will think you did it, all this kind of stuff. This will be what people think of when they think of Ashton Kutcher. You don't want that. Go to the party that you were picking Ashley up to take her with you to. Go to the party and then go home. There's someone else that he called, Danny Masterson. That's how close these guys were. In fact, the night before Ashley was killed, Ashton and Danny and some other people from that 70's show were hanging out at Ashley's house. Where am I going with this? How did Ashton's lies allow a murderer to kill again? The police knew who had killed Ashley Elleron. They could not prosecute the killer because Ashton Kutcher's lies about discovering the body, saying that he didn't, his lies about the whole thing created so much reasonable doubt, would have been used by the defense attorneys to create reasonable doubt to get the killer off of the murder charges, that they chose not to prosecute the person that was their number one suspect for the murder. The police knew Ashton Kutcher was lying. They knew he couldn't have seen anything on the carpet from the windows outside of the house. They knew the only way Ashton Kutcher would have seen anything on the carpet was because he walked into the house. He lied about not entering the house.
So for the next section, I just want to discuss Thorn briefly. I am actually working on a video about Thorn. It's just going to take a while because a lot of the information is not readily available and I've had to request a lot of stuff. So just keep in mind that will be coming sometime in the future. Also, for this little part on Thorn, I'm mainly using the two sources that are linked below. There's a Forbes article and a Follow the Money article. Both of them are paywalled, but the links that I've used below should bring you to the article that you can just freely read. If they do expire, please let me know in the comments and I will issue some fresh ones. So Thorn was originally started by Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore. It was originally called DNA Foundation, Demi and Ashton, but obviously when they got divorced, Demi Moore stayed on as board member and then she eventually left. Ashton Kutcher is the founder and chairman, or at least he was, until everything happened with Danny Masterson and the letter. So Thorn is a technology company, nonprofit, that they basically use their technology to scan everyday people's pictures and then use those images to compare them against images that child predators are posting. So basically it would be a normal person, say holiday picture in the Hilton in Thailand, and then they're comparing it to an image of a child being abused, and they can compare the pictures and see, oh, is this taking place in this hotel? And okay, no, it's not the Hilton in Thailand. Okay, let's go compare it to another picture, and then they'll be able to find the location, go in, save the child, arrest the predator. That is how it is supposed to work. But according to Forbes, Follow the Money, and a lot of other people who've spoken out about Thorn, this is how it works some of the time. And a lot of the numbers that Thorn reports are grossly exaggerated because they are not distinguishing between children in images and images of consenting adult sex workers who are advertising their services. And that is why adult workers are trying to speak out about Thorn, because it's causing a lot of issues for them, and they're obviously already a vulnerable part of society. There's also a lot of other issues. Amazon Rekognition is the software that Thorn uses. This software is flawed and has been proven to misidentify people, especially people of color. Someone ended up putting in all the members of Congress in to kind of test the software, and it falsely identified 28 members of Congress as being previously arrested when none of them had been. There also is the discussion around Thorn and data, because they are selling data.
I was also hearing some things about Thorn that were very concerning. I'm going to jump to that here. I have some things in my notes that I wanted to point out about Thorn. So Thorn has created a technology. It's a product called Spotlight, which uses facial recognition to scrape the internet of escort ads and make a database of them. The technology does not differentiate between potentially exploited children and consensual adult sex workers. Then Thorn sells this data to law enforcement. And the more I learned about that, I did not want to be part of that anymore. He told CNN that in 2011, 100,000 to 300,000 kids are sex trafficked every year in the U.S. And this is an inflated statistic based on a 2001 study, which actually said that the number of kids that were at risk for being sex trafficked. And even that was based in shoddy and widely discredited data from the 90s.
If you've heard Ashton Kutcher speak at any sort of technology, Silicon Valley events, he is an investor in Uber, Airbnb, WeWork. If you want to know more about the disaster that is WeWork, I have a video on that and I'll link it in the cards above. But he is always talking at, Silicon Valley events and things like TechCrunch. And he is always talking about data and how data is the future and it's this super valuable thing. So it makes sense that his company is collecting and selling data. Many people are beginning to speak out about Thorn's selling and collecting of data, including the European Data Protection Supervisor, Wojciech Weferowski, who said just several months ago in the summer of 2023, quote, "Whilst one can be a movie star to advocate a good cause, it is a thorny problem when stakeholders hide behind the notion of civil society, therefore misleading the public, even if unintentionally." The last thing I will say about Thorn is that according to their 2021 tax return, they ended up raising $18 million that year. 14 million of those dollars went to salaries within Thorn. That leaves 4 million. And I know obviously people who work in nonprofits and companies like this have to be paid, and they're generally paid well, but it seems as though an astronomical amount is going towards salaries.
So Thorn had one of their board members that was investing in the tech that Thorn uses was accused of sexual assault by at least one woman, I think maybe two. And they settled out of court for that. So there was never like a conviction. There was like a mediation and a settlement. but that's not a good look to have someone who essays people on a board of a child trafficking organization.
After the backlash to the letters and the apology video just made everything worse, people then went digging, and boy did they find a lot of stuff. There was a lot of old interviews that surfaced about Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, and there is just a plethora of inappropriate behavior. They also contradicted a lot of what they said in their letter about Masterson, who they painted as this wonderful saint, when in reality, just one of the videos that surfaced proved that to be untrue. Ashton Kutcher told a story to Rosie O'Donnell. Mila Kunis was also there telling the story as well. And it basically was about one of their first days on that 70's show. And Ashton Kutcher, who was 19 at the time, was supposed to kiss Mila Kunis, who was 14 and who had never kissed a boy before. And Danny Masterson bet Ashton Kutcher $10 to stick his tongue down her throat.
Kiss. What if someone bet you made with Danny about our first kiss?
No, it wasn't the first kiss. It
No,
was like the second or third kiss.
It was the first. It was like the first week.
No, it was not the first week.
Whatever. Let me tell you what happened.
No, maybe you tell you that.
No. Okay, so I never kissed a guy. So I was so. I mean, you know, Ash was attractive, and I was a 14-year-old little girl, and I was extremely scared for my life. Sure. And he was very nice about it. He was like, "Oh, don't worry." So I was like, "Okay." Then Danny goes and goes, "Dude, I'll give you $10 if you French kiss her." What would you stick your tongue in my mouth or some?
What? No.
For $10.
So Danny bets me like $20 that I wouldn't do it. And of course I'm like, yeah, sure, what's the deal? You know? And then the cops showed up and you got arrested pretty much. They should have, but they didn't.
Did it. And
I so did.
He claims to this day he did that. I swear.
Mila, I so did it.
He never did it? I didn't let him. I think he tried, but I think I kept my mouth so
Yeah. You did the old teeth block?
There also just was a lot of other interviews with Mila Kunis saying some things that happened, and she talks about being pantsed in an interview, and I just think if that is something that you're saying on the red carpet at the series finale of your show, then what is going on behind the scenes if that is what you're telling the press?
Meanwhile, at the same event, Mila joked that the boys on the show did joke around with her quite a bit over the years.
Was it hard growing up, of course, you know, because Ashton and Topher and Wilmer, they're all a bunch of jokesters. So were they torturing you like a little sister on the set back then?
Yeah, I mean, I got pantsed a lot, and I'm forced to wear it. And
yeah, but you look really hot in it.
Well, thanks, Danny. Yeah. I don't feel very hot in it, I have to say.
I ended up getting the job, and I didn't know. Yeah, she was as hot as she was. You know, come on, let's go. 14, she was even hotter. But I'm not allowed to say that.
There was also a lot of other stuff that came out with Ashton Kutcher doing a bit in Punk'd about saying how he couldn't wait for Hilary Duff to turn 18, which is even more bizarre considering he was in a movie with her and actually knew her. And also Danny Masterson's sister, Alana Masterson, is like best friends forever with Hilary Duff, and Danny Masterson and Ashton Kutcher are best friends, so it's like his best friend's little sister's friend. And he also said he was waiting for the Olsen twins to turn 18.
Hilary Duff is in Lizzie McGuire. She also has an album out. She's going to be in a movie called Cheaper by the Dozen, and she's one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18. Along with the Olsen twins.
But there's just a lot of other interviews too of Kutcher being rude.
I'm so late. Am I late?
You're late. Come on in.
What are you talking about?
It just wouldn't be Hollywood without the attitude. The star arrives fashionably dressed and fashionably film star late.
I think the commentary on the age difference between you and Demi is justified in any way.
Look, why are people talking about Janet Jackson's boob? Why is that? Who cares? It's a boob. It's a tit. It's a boob. I have one. I mean, censor that. What is it? Like, you think children, I mean, you nurse on a boob. Most children come out the womb and the first thing they do is go right for the tit.
Gilligan's Island had Ginger, and Lost has Evangeline Lilly. What's up? How you doing? Here's my issue with her, though. She's dating a freaking hobbit. Didn't we all learn from Julia Roberts when she was with Lyle Lovett? It doesn't work out. Hot people need to be with hot people. Cameron Diaz, Justin Timberlake. Good looking, good looking. Make a baby. Let the uggos hang out together.
And there's one in particular of him and Brittany Murphy where they're being interviewed for their movie Just Married, and poor Brittany Murphy is trying to apologize and be really sweet to the interviewer because Ashton Kutcher is being rude.
To be with an extraordinary actor. Stop it now. Silly goose. And Sean Levy, the director, really fabulous. He was fantastic to work with. We really just had a very joyous experience.
There's just tons of interviews that I'll put some clips in here so you can see some other ones about him being inappropriate with Mila Kunis.
My name is Mila Kunis, and I'm from That 70's Show, and you're watching...
Hi, I'm Ashton Kutcher, and I'm from That 70's Show TV, That 70's Show too.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing this is not because I think immigrants is good, but because Josh told me to be able to sit on my lap and like... It feels good.
Not only do I get to work with our beautiful, sexy, hot next guest on That 70's Show, but I'm lucky enough to play her boyfriend, so I can make out with her. Okay, a very talented, hot, smart, and beautiful Mila Kunis.
And again, in these interviews that I'm sharing, Mila Kunis is between 14 and 17 in a lot of these interviews, and Ashton Kutcher is into his early 20s, and it's just incredibly inappropriate, especially when you have the background knowledge that we talked about in the very beginning of this video, where Danny Masterson is the leader of all of these kids on That 70's Show and is the one that's encouraging them all, and they're writing this letter saying he's this fantastic older brother figure. But I do think Mila Kunis was like conditioned on that set to be the cool girl that just lets them do whatever they want. And Chrissy Bixler did also allude to an incident with Kunis and Masterson. I haven't been able to dig up anything about this incident, and I'm not, really sure to what extent something happened, but it just was something that she mentioned. Ashton Kutcher has a very poor track record of how he treats his girlfriends. I mean, there's a lot of stories about him from his exes, and of course, like, your exes maybe aren't gonna tell the best stories about you, but in particular there's one from January Jones, who, I mean, he's cheated on like every single girlfriend he's ever had, and she was no different. They dated before January Jones had really got her foot in the door, like acting wise, and he actually told her, you shouldn't act because you're awful, which is pretty funny considering January Jones was like a star of Mad Men, which is like one of the most critically acclaimed shows of like the last couple of decades, and Ashton Kutcher was in My Boss's Daughter, and I don't think he has more than maybe 2 movies that have over 5 out of 10 on IMDb.
A funny aside, Ashton first moved to LA with January Jones, the actress who played Betty Draper on Mad Men. They were engaged and they were both just starting out at the time, modeling, taking small parts. As a 23-year-old, January had a tiny role in the movie Bruce starred in when he was 46. Ashton was convinced they'd had a fling on set. Years later, I happened to sit next to January at an event, and I mentioned this. "Are you serious?" she said, laughing. "I told him 100 times I didn't want to fuck that old man."
It wasn't just his girlfriends that he cheated on, though, as it's widely known now, after being confirmed in her book, that Ashton Kutcher cheated on his then wife, Demi Moore, several times. I'm not saying Demi Moore is any saint, I'm just talking about Ashton Kutcher here.
I was working in New York on a film with Ellen Barkin called Another Happy Day when the story broke. Ashton had slept with a 21-year-old in our home while I was out of town. Suddenly his infidelity was all over the celebrity gossip circuit. When the news came out in the press, we were already scheduled to do an event at the Clinton Global Initiative, launching our foundation to fight human trafficking. I went into lockdown mode, so we came to New York, and I put on a brave face, and we gave our presentation on September 23rd, 2010, the day before our anniversary. Ashton spoke about how there are more slaves on Earth now than in any other time in human history. I talked about the Real Men Don't Buy Girls campaign we were launching to try to alter the culture that enables men to feel okay about paying for sex with underage girls. 1 in 5 men have engaged in the commercial sex trade. I announced to that room full of important people, standing next to my husband of 5 years, who just cheated on me with a girl about the age of my oldest daughter. Real men protect, respect, love, and care for girls, but I did not feel protected, respected, loved, or cared for myself.
But he cheated on her many times, with the most hurtful one, according to what she wrote in her book, was the incident where Ashton Kutcher cheated on her just after she'd had a miscarriage with 2 girls at Danny Masterson's house, and then the press got a hold of it and it was like a huge story. And that actually happened the night before their like big launch of what would become Thorn. It was then DNA Foundation, and she had to go and do this whole event and speak with him on stage after he had just cheated on her the night before.
It was coming up on our 6th anniversary. Danny Masterson was having a bachelor party the same weekend. He went, and when he returned the next day, he said he'd had a great time. To celebrate our anniversary, he took me to the place we went on our first date, to that piece of land he'd bought that held so many of his fantasies. I was at the Crosby Hotel, about to get my hair and makeup done for the premiere that evening, when I got a Google alert on my phone. Ashton Kutcher caught cheating flashed across my screen. At first, I assumed that it was more about the previous year's incident, that one of the tabloids had just found a new way to repackage it. But once I clicked on the link, I realized it was brand new. It was about the weekend of our anniversary that had just passed, the night he was in San Diego at the bachelor party. There were quotes from a young blonde replaying Ashton's pickup lines. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew those words. I knew she wasn't lying. "Aren't you married?" she said she'd asked him. To which he replied that he was separated. Then he spent the night with her, got up, and drove home to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. "Are you fucking kidding me?" is what came out of my mouth when he picked up the phone. By which I meant, how dumb can you get? Did you want to get caught? The truth is, yes, on a subconscious level, he probably did. And what about me? Did you really have to put me in this position again? You couldn't at least have found a way to cheat on me quietly? To privately break my heart without dragging me through a public gauntlet of humiliation? He admitted it right away. Then I had to hang up and go walk the red carpet, praying with every step that this information hadn't gone wide yet, that nobody would thrust a microphone in my face and ask how I felt about my husband of 6 years, fucking a 21-year-old he'd been hanging out with in a hot tub the weekend of our anniversary.
While I was doing a bit of research on Ashton Kutcher cheating on Demi Moore and the fact it was in Danny Masterson's house, I came across a video from another YouTuber that was very well put together, and in it she discusses how there was this article about Danny Masterson's previous home and the amount of cameras that were in this house.
Because I saw some people on Twitter saying that they lived in LA around that time, and Danny and Ashton and Wilmer kind of like ran the club scene. And I even saw some people saying that it was like a known thing that if you're a young girl, you just kind of don't go around Danny Masterson. Did find this 2007 article from LA Curb. I guess it's like a Los Angeles kind of real estate blog. It's from 2007, and it says, "A look inside Danny Masterson's home." It says it's his Beechwood Canyon home, but they revealed a few things, I guess, after they toured his house, saying, 1, this guy loves his Scientology. Nearly every room had a plaque of affirmations, or whatever they call them, books on the subject, etc. 2, this guy loves himself. A good 25% of the pop art in the house are drawings and photos and sketches of himself. Oh, and all the mail comes to his inside joke names of D-Punch. Clever self-reference. So D-Punch likely refers to Donkey Punch, which is what he used to go by as part of his like stage name as a DJ. And Donkey Punch is one of those names that people give to sex acts that are really just like assault. It's a weird name to go by, especially if you're someone who actually is assaulting women. But anyway, then it says 3, this guy loves his surveillance. Forget exterior cameras, par for the course in celeb-owned Hollywood Hills houses. There are 17 interior cameras planted club-style in those smoked glass orbs in every room. Danny can watch the comings and goings all over the house from the control grid in his master closet/safe room. Why did he need 17 interior cameras?
There also was a tweet from Chrissy Bixler talking about a secret meeting between herself, Danny Masterson, Ashton Kutcher, Laura Prepon, and January Jones that took place in Masterson's house, and Bixler also hashtagged hidden cameras. So it doesn't seem too far-fetched that these hidden cameras could be one of the ways that Masterson has a lot of dirt on Kutcher, and therefore Scientology has a lot of dirt on Kutcher, because also Masterson spoke about the fact that he has nude images of Ashton Kutcher when they were both on James Corden on his show, and this could be one of the ways that he's got those images.
I have more photos of Commando Kutcher here naked in a club than probably anybody.
Also, if there's parties happening there, and I mean, Danny Masterson is his best friend, and even Chrissy Bixler's talking about meetings that have happened at that house, God knows what Danny Masterson has on any of these people, and therefore Scientology has it too. I'd be really interested to see what Masterson, Kunis, and Kutcher's relationship is like now. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say they are still standing by him, because if they're going to stand by him after he's been convicted of violent rapes, then like, what else is going to stop them? They have really, really damaged their career. I think they're still going to have people that are still going to see their movies and like them, but I do think there's a large portion of their fan base who won't engage with them or their content anymore, because even since this happened in September, Ashton Kutcher has only posted twice since then, and those comments are still filled with people discussing the letters and everything that happened due to the fallout. So I don't see them being forgotten about anytime soon, like what they did being forgotten about. I do think that this will follow them for a long time. And there is one more thing that Masterson cost them along with their reputation, and that was about $30 million. So before everything had happened with the trial, before Masterson had even been arrested, there was a lot of discussions and negotiations going on about the streaming rights for that 70's show. And given that there's 8 seasons and 200 episodes, it would be a substantial amount of money, over 10 million, probably 15 million each for each of the main cast members. They were all in discussions. Netflix, is the big giant. They're gonna try and get most of the big popular shows like that, and they actually ended up recusing themselves because they didn't want to give a big payout to Danny Masterson. And pretty much all of the other networks recused themselves too, because I know that 70's show is on Peacock, but like, Peacock is a drop in the ocean in the streaming giant wars. It's only in the US, and it's really, a small TV channel, NBC based streaming network. It's not the same as Netflix and Disney Plus, and Hulu is Disney Plus is basically Hulu in the rest of the world, but it's not the same, and the amount that they got from that was not anything close to touching what they would have got if Netflix or Disney Plus or someone like that would have purchased those rights. And this isn't just a one-time payout, this is a yearly thing. So for example, the Friends cast, they each get about $20 million every single year from Warner Brothers for the streaming rights, because in the rest of the world, Friends is on Netflix. So they're getting all of that money from every Netflix in every country, and then they're also getting the Max or HBO Max money from in the US. So this is extremely lucrative, and if you have a big show like this, if you're on Friends, ER, Grey's Anatomy, shows like that, you can live off that for the rest of your life. So Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis being a couple, they're gonna get like 30 million if those rights were sold, but due to Danny Masterson, just no one has been interested. I think the person who summed this all up the best was actually Christina Ricci, who is someone who never gets involved in any sort of controversy like this, and she's also someone who's been in the industry since she was a child, so she's really someone who knows what she's talking about. And Christina Ricci ended up coming out and saying, quote, "So sometimes people we loved and admired do horrible things. They might not do these things to us, and we only know who they were to us, but that doesn't mean they didn't do those horrible things. And to discredit the abused is a crime. People we know as awesome guys can be predators and abusers. It's tough to accept, but we have to. If we say we support victims, women, children, men, boys, girls, then we must be able to take this stance. Unfortunately, I've known a lot of awesome guys who were lovely to me, but proven to be abusers privately. I've also had personal experience with this. Believe victims. It's not easy to come forward. It's not easy to get a conviction. As I mentioned before, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis have been completely silent apart from 2 Instagram posts and 1 post on Twitter where Ashton Kutcher said, it was posted on Thanksgiving, that he was thankful for no comment, and most people were like, why are you commenting then? Why did you comment? Why didn't you just not comment? So nothing really came out of that apart from people ripping into him. And then he posted once for Christmas and Hanukkah, and that post was also filled with a plethora of comments about all of this situation. There is currently speculation that Ashton Kutcher's house may be raided due to Danny Masterson's missing weapons, and we're going to discuss that and all of the Danny Masterson updates in the next chapter. We're going to get into the final chapter now, which will encompass everything recent about Masterson, what's happening regarding his sentencing, his divorce. But again, if you want to know a lot more about Masterson, his crimes, and his trial, I strongly recommend checking out my other video, as there is so much more in there that I just couldn't fit in this video, given that we're covering all of the cast members except King Topher Grace. Even just looking at some of the things Masterson has said in interviews over the years, it's truly horrendous.
Kunis or Prepon? That's number 1.
I'll take them both.
Okay. What? Roll clip, please?
No.
Yes. Those of you just listening.
Are you tired of lackadaisical lawyers sitting behind their cushy desk making faulty promises? Hello.
That's my favorite right there.
I'm Morrison, the executioner, Rodriguez, divorce lawyer, and I will rape your spouse.
And the last thing I'll say before we get into the updates is that next year there will be a civil trial involving Masterson and the Church of Scientology. That's scheduled for September 2025. I also wouldn't be surprised if between then and now, even more women come forward as victims of Masterson. As according to Aaron Smith-Levin and several other people close to this case, there are almost 20 known victims of Masterson. And if there are almost 20 known victims, I'm sure there are even more out there. Masterson was taken into custody immediately after being found guilty, but he didn't immediately go to prison. He actually has spent pretty much all of his time in jail. He only went to prison about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Maybe add another week onto that between me filming this and releasing this. But he was sentenced to 30 years to life, which means that he will serve at least 30 years before he has a chance at parole. But obviously they can say no, and he can spend the rest of his life in prison. This was misreported a lot, with people saying he got 30 years and then immediately at 30 years he's going to be out. That's not the case. He has a chance at parole at 30 years, and he may actually get a chance at parole earlier than that at 20 years, because there's a law in California where if a prisoner is 65 and they've done at least 20 years of their sentence, they can have a chance at parole. But again, they can always say no. Masterson is currently serving at North Kern State Prison in Delano, California. Breaking news. As always, the day that I'm about to upload a video or the day before, there is always something that comes out that means that I have to do something like this, re-edit, and hope that I can get it all done in time to get it uploaded, because the videos are an hour and a half, so they take a long time to get uploaded. So today is Friday, February the 2nd. I'm hoping to still get this up today. Danny Masterson was being housed at North Kern State Prison, and we knew that wasn't going to be his forever home, but he has now been moved to Corcoran State Prison. It's about half an hour away from North Kern, which is also like a processing center. So it's the 2nd of February today. Saturday. He was moved on the 29th of January, and then obviously, you know, it takes a day or two for the information to come out. So this place is 3.5 hours away from Los Angeles, where obviously his family and, like, you know, Scientology, everybody he knows is in Los Angeles. So if you're driving 3.5 hours to go visit him and 3.5 hours back, like, that is an entire day. And normally prisons like this, the visitations on like the weekend, the Saturday. So are they really going to drive his daughter is really young up there and back, and his siblings and his mom and friends? Like, that's a lot, especially considering he's doing 2 back-to-back life sentences, 15 years to life. Doing that year in, year out, driving that way, that's a lot. So I'm not sure how many visitors he's going to get, but hopefully that is it for the updates. Now back to Past Me.
Let's take a look at this. This record here says Daniel P. Masterson, CDCR number BW7253, 47 years old. Current location, California State Prison, Corcoran. Now look, it says the admission date there was December 27, but I have an email here from the CDCR saying Daniel Masterson was transferred to Corcoran State Prison on January 29th, 2024. CDCR operates with a reception center process. People start at reception centers for processing and assessment, and are then sent to their longer term placement. More information is here. So December 27 is when he was transferred to, well, what I have here on the map is North Kern State Prison. Now, he wasn't on December 27th. There is actually a processing center about, it's either across the street or just down the street from North Kern State Prison. And so there was some speculation that perhaps when he got done at the processing center, he was just going to be transferred to North Kern State Prison as opposed to the processing center itself. But indeed, he was in fact sent to Corcoran, which is 30 minutes north of North Kern State Prison.
And as expected, he has appealed his sentence. He did have a request to be out on bail while going through his appeal, and just a few days ago, Judge Almeida denied this request. She actually denied this because she thinks that Masterson is a flight risk, and his current marital status is one of the reasons that she thinks he might run. Masterson and his wife Bijou Phillips are currently going through a divorce, and this was cited as one of the reasons as to why the bail was being denied, because Masterson, without a wife at home, may just flee the country. The judge is quoted as saying, "In light of the fact the defendant has no wife to go home to, defendant now has every incentive to flee and little reason to return to state prison to serve out the remainder of his lengthy sentence should his appeal be unsuccessful." The judge also said that Masterson, quote, "will likely remain in custody for decades and perhaps the rest of his life if his conviction and sentences are upheld on appeal." Meanwhile, Masterson's legal team maintained in their filings that the convicted rapist possessed a lack of dangerousness. Bijou Phillips, Masterson's soon-to-be ex-wife, seems to be not only leaving Masterson, but leaving Scientology, and she seems to be having the time of her life. She's frequently posting Instagram stories about what she's doing. She's out a lot, seems to be connecting with old friends, and just going about living what seems to be a nice life. I have heard small rumblings and rumors that Bijou could possibly be writing a book, and boy, would that be interesting. Bijou stepping out and exposing not only what went on behind closed doors with Masterson, but also exposing what happens behind closed doors with Scientology could provide some riveting material, and it would be very lucrative for Bijou and her daughter, and I know people would be super interested to read it because she knows all the dark and dirty secrets, and I'm sure she knows not only Masterson's, but there'll be a lot about the That 70's Show cast. For more about the That 70's Show cast, I have individual videos on them all on my main channel, Coffee and Cults, and I have several videos on Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis and their business dealings as well. They will all be linked down below. And now let's get into everything Gossip Girl. If there was ever a television show that lived up to its name, it was Gossip Girl. A show that chronicled the lives of a group of rich, beautiful, and extremely messy New Yorkers in their teens and early 20s who people loved to gossip about. And that synopsis applies to both the characters on the show and the cast of the show. And when it comes to the Gossip Girl cast, there's a lot to talk about. The show ended over a decade ago, but the Gossip Girl cast are still making headlines for what they're getting up to in their lives and behind the scenes. When Gossip Girl hit the CW in September 2007, it was an immediate hit, and the cast went from being unknown to extremely famous overnight. And with mega fame came the prying eyes of the media. Gossip Girl was also a CW show, which meant both the network producers and writers encouraged the cast to live the same lives as the characters they played on TV. But the Gossip Girl actors didn't need much persuading, as they not only partied like their show counterparts, but they also fought, schemed, and dated like them too, with many of the cast dating each other, feuding with each other, cheating on each other, and getting wrapped up in all kinds of messy Hollywood dynamics, businesses, and relationships. The cast antics, infighting, feuds, and controversies became as famous as the show itself, and the on-set drama was so juicy and talked about that at one point there was even a main cast member allegedly sharing other cast members' secrets and what was going on behind the scenes with the media. There have also been some extremely horrendous allegations against certain cast members, with certain actors being accused of monstrous behaviour. And while Gossip Girl's massive success meant a lot of the cast antics spilled into the public eye, more than a few stories did remain behind closed doors over the years. But we'll be getting into all the behind-the-scenes stories, along with what the Gossip Girl stars have been up to after the show ended. The good, the bad, and the messy. And also revealing the one main cast member that decided she was going to take the show's storylines a little too literally, becoming a real-life Gossip Girl herself. Every episode of Gossip Girl starts and ends with voiceover narration by Gossip Girl herself that's voiced by Kristen Bell.
You know you love me. XOXO, Gossip Girl.
And the mystery of who Gossip Girl is stretches the entire 6 seasons of the show. In the series finale, spoiler alert if you don't want to know who Gossip Girl is, Gossip Girl is unmasked and revealed to be Dan Humphrey, who is played by Penn Badgley, which both fans and the cast of the show agree made absolutely no sense at all and showed how far off the rails this show had gone. But season 1 of Gossip Girl, the only thing off the rails was the cast. And just the same as Gossip Girl being a source of fascination for the characters, the cast of Gossip Girl was a source of fascination for fans and the general public when the show was airing on the CW. The show is set in New York City on the Upper East Side and follows a group of teenagers whose scandals are documented by the aforementioned anonymous Gossip Girl. The teenagers in the beginning all attend 2 different fictional private schools, Constance Billard and St. Jude's, and later the characters go to university. The cast is primarily made up of Blake Lively as Serena Vanderwoodson, Leighton Meester as Blair Waldorf, Penn Badgley as Dan Humphrey, Chance Crawford as Nate Archibald, Ed Westwick as Chuck Bass, and Taylor Momsen as Jenny Humphrey for the first 4 seasons, Jessica Schwartz as Vanessa Abrams, also just for seasons 1 through 4. Michelle Trachtenberg was on the show as Georgina Sparks, and although she wasn't in every episode or the vast majority of episodes, she was on the show for the entire run and played the main kind of villain antagonist. And then, as I already mentioned, famously, Kristen Bell did the voice or voiceover of the entity of Gossip Girl. When Blake Lively was cast as Serena Vanderwoodson, she actually turned the role down initially because she said she wanted to go to college. She'd only done 3 roles prior to Gossip Girl, but her first ever role was a lead role in The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants that came out in 2005, and that movie was pretty popular and really put her on the map, especially considering it was her first thing ever. Gossip Girl's creators and producers initially told Blake that after the first season, things would die down with the show and she could go to Columbia part-time. They promised that this would happen, but they just couldn't put it in writing. Spoiler alert, she didn't go to Columbia, things didn't die down, and there's a reason they didn't put anything in writing. I don't find it surprising that the producers told her this because, of course, typical Hollywood bullshit, they're going to tell her whatever to try and get her to sign. But I do find it kind of surprising that Blake Lively didn't realize this because of her being from an acting family and being also pretty wealthy, that she'd be able to hopefully have a good team around her. I do think that the producers were just saying whatever they could, because while they couldn't know for sure that Gossip Girl was going to be really, really successful, they probably had a pretty good understanding that it was going to be at least somewhat successful, because one, the show was based on a popular book series, so there was a basic built-in audience. But more importantly, at this time, these type of teen shows were incredibly popular, and the creators and producers absolutely knew this, because when they were casting Gossip Girl, they were filming the last season of their wildly popular teen show, which was basically the original California version of Gossip Girl, The OC. The OC was an absolute phenomenon, and let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with this, but if I had to pick which one was more popular between Gossip Girl and the OC, I would say it was the OC, at least like first season comparisons. That could also be because the OC came out like the year I moved to the US and I was 16, and my friends and I would literally have like sleepovers during the second season to watch new episodes, and Gossip Girl came out my freshman year in college. Loved both of them, but the OC, it just seemed much bigger, but it could be because I was in high school at the time. So Blake didn't end up going to Columbia in season 2, and towards the final few seasons of Gossip Girl, especially the last year, she did try and exit the show, but she ended up staying until the end of its run after 6 seasons. The rest of casting on the show went pretty smoothly, but that is where things running smoothly ends when it comes to Gossip Girl. Almost immediately, there were issues on the set of Gossip Girl. The show was a hit overnight, and the cast became extremely famous, so there was a lot of fascination of what was going on behind the scenes, and that just grew and grew whenever people realized it wasn't running smoothly at all, and there was a lot of drama with the cast. Lots of allegations surfaced of certain cast members causing huge issues, having tantrums, not knowing their lines, holding up production. There were substance use problems with many cast members, rumors of feuds between multiple cast members, and more than one romantic relationship between the cast. In short, what was going on behind the scenes of Gossip Girl wasn't too dissimilar to what was going on the show itself. As I mentioned before, Blake Lively initially, when being cast, didn't really want to be on the show, and pretty much all of the main cast members didn't want to be on the show a few seasons in, but that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Someone else who didn't want to be on the show practically from the outset was Taylor Momsen. She played Jenny Humphrey, and Gossip Girl started with Jenny as our kind of introductory character. She was how the audience enters this rich, beautiful world. Taylor Momsen was only 12 when she was cast on Gossip Girl, and 13 and 14 through the show's first season, with everyone else on the cast being 20, 21, 22. She was a child actor and appeared in films like How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Spy Kids 2. But this was a totally different experience. One, it was a CW show aimed at late teens and young adults, and two, it brought with it a crazy level of fame.
It was always weird for me being young and suddenly kind of overnight being tabloid famous, which is a different kind of famous, where suddenly they're out, the paparazzi's outside your house, and they're following you, and they're following me taking my sister to school, and like just weird, you know, it's weird. And they would photograph me on set, like as everyone on set, because we film in the streets of New York, as my character, and put it in the tabloids as Taylor Momsen.
Right.
And say, Taylor Momsen's wearing this, and Taylor Momsen's blah, blah, blah. And that started to really bug me because my identity was getting kind of taken over, I guess.
Yeah, television, playing a character, it's so different from when you're playing a role in a film.
Oh,
because your identities aren't collapsed in the same way. And
Taylor didn't want to be on the show because she didn't want to act at all. She wanted to be a musician, and today that is actually what she's doing. In fact, Gossip Girl was her last acting job she ever did, and she ended up by season 4 majorly tapering down her appearance on the show and leaving it all together at the end of that 4th season, with her only returning for the series finale in season 6.
It was a childhood thing that, you know, I got put into. So 2 years old. I wasn't making my own choices then. And literally as soon as I got to an age where I could make my own decision, it was like a click. I don't know exactly what happened, but it's like I woke up one morning and went, wait a second. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this other job. I can just play in my band, and I can tour and write songs. That's all. I can just do that.
Taylor's exit from the show wasn't just about her not wanting to act. A lot of it had to do with her on-set behavior, her issues with her co-stars, and her behavior when it came to the actual acting, learning lines, turning up on time, and turning up to set at all. There were frequent times that she would be extremely late to set or even not show up at all. And when that happens, the scripts would be really hastily rewritten to explain her character's absence. A lot of actors, both series regulars and those guest starring on Gossip Girl, had problems working with Taylor, as she would never learn her lines, and filming scenes with her would take a painstaking amount of time. She also would hold up production by being extremely late, and as the show went on, as I said, she just wouldn't turn up at all. I've spoken in other videos before about what a nightmare this can be when cast create these difficulties with not being on time or not showing up, because it's not just the people that you're thinking of, like other actors in the scenes. There are hundreds of people that you are holding up with all of the crew, everybody working on that scene, and all of the people that are going to be working on the next scene. These productions, especially CW shows, they're running on such a tight schedule. And one thing that I don't think is understood a lot by the general public is just how many people work on these sets. And so one actor being late can have such huge repercussions. And every single time that production's held up, they might as well just be burning money because everyone is just standing around waiting for that person to come to set. There was also a lot of talk at the time that Gossip Girl was being filmed about MOMSEN's tensions with both Blake Lively and Leighton Meester, but it seems like there were tensions with all of the cast and crew because of the environment. A lot of people used to be quite harsh to Taylor Momsen about not socializing with the rest of the cast, but I think that's pretty understandable, even forgetting for a minute that there were issues because of her behavior, but she was in her very early teens shooting the show, and the rest of the cast were in their early to mid-20s. Momsen's on-set behavior started to be discussed in the mainstream when guest stars from the show, like Tim Gunn, started talking openly about how difficult it was to film with Momsen and how poorly she had behaved on set. Things soon became untenable for Gossip Girl producers and the CW, and they knew they couldn't continue. CW shows are kind of a rule unto themselves, and their producers and network executives, unlike other networks, they are pretty big fans of their cast getting in real life messy drama, and they love when these things are being reported in the press. They love when the co-stars date each other. The CW writers even love to incorporate the real cast drama into the writing. And there's many CW stars who have discussed the fact that they have had their very personal problems, some of which were public and some of which weren't, written into the show they were on. But while the CW loves their cast making tabloid and gossip site fodder, you better not mess with the money. And Taylor Momsen was costing the show a lot of money. So the producers knew that this just couldn't continue. By season 3, Taylor Momsen was even less interested in the show and wanted to focus on her music career. So the show's producers and Momsen came to an agreement. The producers wouldn't let her out of her contract and they wouldn't fire her, but they would write her out of the show as long as she agreed to not act in any other projects, which that of course was fine by Momsen as she didn't want to act.
They went, well, we can't let you out of your deal, but we can write you out of the show so you can go on tour. You can't act in anything else. And I went, that's fine. That's not what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I can't exactly. They're like, but if you're not in the episode, if we don't write you in the episode, you're not in the episode.
Right.
And so that's, they really allowed me to follow my dream. And
that's beautiful.
And so I'm forever grateful and thankful to them for that.
So by the time season 4 came, she only was obligated to do 4 episodes. And in season 5, she didn't appear at all, with the audience being rather infamously told her character had gone to London to go to fashion school. And the deal that I mentioned with producers, that allowed her to return just for the series finale, which happened in season 6. When returning for the finale, she did get a trade-off too, as one of her songs, Kill Me, was featured in the series finale. Along with her music appearing in the Gossip Girl series finale, it did also appear in other CW shows such as The Vampire Diaries. Today, Momsen is still the frontwoman of the band The Pretty Reckless, which is the band she was a part of when her songs were featured on Gossip Girl and The Vampire Diaries. As I mentioned, she hasn't acted since Gossip Girl and seemingly has no intentions to. In the past few years, she has spoken more about Gossip Girl and her exit from the show, her mental health at the time, and her music. 2 other things that were of major concern when Momsen was on Gossip Girl and for several years after that were her alleged substance use and her relationship with certain people in the music industry, one of which was Marilyn Manson. Even while filming Gossip Girl, there was a lot of discussion about Momsen's on-set behavior being linked to her substance use, as the Gossip Girl set was widely known for having quite a lot of cast members who were struggling with this. The others we'll discuss in a minute, but there was major concern for Momsen due to her very young age. There was definitely a lot of pressure on her at that time because there was so many people discussing her and her well-being and what she was doing, what she wasn't doing. There was a lot of pictures and videos and paparazzi shots that were always circulating about her and people just discussing her in general and her mental health and what she was doing. And she was also surrounded by a lot of older people in the music industry. So it's kind of no wonder that she went through all these struggles with such a microscope on her and so many people making allegations about what was going on with her. As I said, she was on Penn Badgley's podcast last year, so hopefully she is in a better place today than when she was on the show. There's not really a good resolution to come to when it comes to Taylor Momsen, as ultimately it seems like her parents forced her into acting. She got enormous fame and money at a very young age for something she didn't really want to do, with a lot of eyes on her at all times, which that's kind of a recipe for disaster. But at the same time, she did make things very difficult for everyone just trying to work and do their job on the set of Gossip Girl. If you haven't seen Gossip Girl, I will give you a few little tiny bits of information that you might need for context, but if you haven't seen it and you don't want to put yourself through the whole show, I highly recommend Mike's Mike, his series about it. I'm sure most people have heard of him. He's a really well-known YouTuber, and also Friendly Space Ninja has a great video about Gossip Girl. Season 1 is great of Gossip Girl. That's worth watching, but honestly, it takes a very sharp decline after season 1, which is down to a lot of things, but a big one being that Josh Schwartz, the creator and showrunner, the guy who made the OC, he actually left. When Josh Schwartz left, the new showrunner and the new producers, they started making a lot of decisions based on what was really popular with fans rather than what made a good story. And while of course it is important to listen to fans and to take their feedback on board, you can turn your show into a bit of a mess trying to appease to every fan, and sometimes the vocal minority don't have the best ideas, especially when it was a show that hadn't been on for longer than a year, and so much of that show was the writing and the characters in season 1, and they just changed pretty much everything from season 2 onwards. One of the major changes after season 1 was to the character of Chuck Bass, played by Ed Westwick. In the pilot, Chuck Bass is horrendous. He assaults not one, but 2 of the main female cast members, Blair and Jenny, and he does some truly heinous things throughout the series. Chuck Bass is truly the epitome of spoiled, selfish, rich asshole, but fans absolutely loved the character, mainly because of Ed Westwick's performance. With season 2, Chuck pretty much becomes somewhat of the lead character of the show, but the writers also decide in season 2 that they want to try and redeem Chuck Bass despite all the things that I've mentioned and a plethora of other abhorrent things. Additionally, the character of Nate Archibald, who was Chuck Bass's best friend, he was also a fan favorite. And if you haven't seen the show, but you're seeing the clips that I'm showing on the screen right now, you're probably going to get a hint as to why he was a fan favorite, because he was played by a beautiful man named Chase Crawford. Even as a lesbian, I could say that this is a beautiful man. That wasn't the only reason though, as Nate Archibald was really the only character that was in any way a decent person in the series. So Chase Crawford and Ed Westwick were playing these 2 very popular characters. They were young actors on a wildly successful show living in New York, and they spent a lot of their time enjoying the New York nightlife when they were filming the show, especially at the height of the show's popularity in the early years. It seemed honestly like every day for a while in the early years there was a story from people partying with Ed Westwick and Chase Crawford. Westwick and Crawford were also at one point roommates in the earlier seasons of the show, and there were a lot of stories that came out about their parties that they used to throw at their apartment that was on 10th Avenue and 26th Street in Chelsea. They frequently would have guests like Lindsay Lohan over for rooftop parties, and this was all 2007 to like 2010, 2011. So it was really at the height of all of this Lindsay Lohan and teens and prior to social media. Ed Westwick also dated Jessica Schwartz, who played Vanessa on the show, relationship and the messiness of it. Jessica show, and they had a on and off relationship for years. Their relationship was always allegedly very messy, and there have been a lot of people associated and involved with the show who spoke about substance use playing a role in their relationship and the messiness of it. Jessica Soar left the show at the same time Taylor Momsen did at the end of season 4. Unlike Momsen, Jessica's character Vanessa was not very well received by fans, and she got a lot of backlash in regards to that. Also, similar to Momsen, her character wasn't very involved in the show show by the time she did leave in season 4, and she hadn't really had any significant storylines for quite a while. Of course, when Jessica Soar left Gossip Girl, there was the usual bullshit PR statement of, oh, I discussed with the producers and we decided the character had ran its course, so I'm leaving, which in a CW show, no character, or no CW show for that matter, ever runs its course. It's just dragged out to the end of time if possible, and characters just kind of putter around with no clear direction. Her character hadn't had any direction for years either, so I don't know why it made a difference at the end of season 4. Jessica and Taylor Momsen's exits from the show came about allegedly because things were really coming to a head on the set of Gossip Girl, and there were a lot of tensions on the set at this time. At the time, which was 2010, 2011, when season 4 is filming and airing, there were many issues between cast members. Blake Lively and Leighton Meester allegedly had a feud, which we will get into later. Chase and Ed Westwick were rumored to have a falling out, but then things seemingly were fine after a while. And there was also the drama of Ed Westwick and Jessica Soar breaking up and constantly having issues and fights and getting back together. And then on top of it was Taylor Momsen's behavior and being late and not knowing her lines, which created even more issues on the set and between the majority of the cast, with even the crew having some issues due to things like lateness. A lot of this information that I'm discussing is widely known, and there are countless stories about issues on the Gossip Girl set, because the Gossip Girl set allegedly had its own Gossip Girl who would sometimes tip off outlets about feuding co-stars and other things that were going on behind the scenes. See if you can guess who that Gossip Girl cast member was, and I'll reveal who it was at the end of the video. Chase Crawford, while he was on the show, developed a friendship with a group that is known in Hollywood as the Podwall Group, and I've spoken about this group in my Nickelodeon video. That group is honestly a video in itself, maybe even a series, but honestly maybe a Patreon video, to be honest. The group has a lot of members, but Chase Crawford seemed to be the closest with JC Chazet, who they also lived together at one point, and also people like Matthew Morrison from Glee, who I've done a Glee video before, and Sean Pyfrom, who was in Desperate Housewives, which I just did a video on that show too. Outside of stories about lots of partying, you don't hear too much about Chase Crawford in the mainstream media, apart from all of the paparazzi walks he does, as he is the king of doing stage paparazzi shots, especially with random products that are perfectly having their labels face the camera that he definitely hasn't been paid for, but that's not the worst thing in the world, is it? Outside of the mainstream media, there is, as I said, a lot of discussion about Chase and Jay-Z and that whole group. And Chase is also a pretty big blind item celebrity. But of course, blinds, it's difficult to say because some are absolutely true and some are absolutely false. Today, Chase is on one of the best shows on TV, The Boys, which one of my absolute favorite shows, and I highly recommend. Up until 2017, Ed Westwick was mainly known for his partying, and he was still primarily known for Gossip Girl, his biggest role by far. But in November 2017, not too long after the Me Too movement, Ed Westwick was accused of rape by multiple women. To be crystal clear, everything that I'm going to discuss here is alleged. Westwick was not found guilty of any of these accusations, nor was he charged. On top of the specific allegations that we're going to discuss now, there were other women that in 2017, 2018, and 2019 that came forward with allegations against Westwick, but in those cases, it was not possible to pursue charges due to the statute of limitations being up in regards to those incidents. But the first accusations against Westwick were put forward on November 6, 2017 by Christina Cohen. Christina Cohen is an actress, and she first accused Westwick of rape in a Facebook post. She claimed that in 2014, she was at Westwick's house with her then boyfriend, who was a producer, and she was feeling uncomfortable after Westwick propositioned her and her partner for a threesome. She wanted to leave, but her boyfriend, who was a producer, didn't want to be rude to Westwick, so allegedly she said that she would stay while her boyfriend tried to smooth things over with him. She alleged that she went to sleep in a guest room and she woke up to Westwick assaulting her. Cohen stated that she was pressured by her boyfriend after the incident to not come forward because of Westwick being famous and the boyfriend being a producer, and how this would also affect his career and her career as an actress. The second accusation came from Orly Wynn, also in November 2017, and she spoke out a few days after Christina Cohen. She came forward with a very similar allegation against Westwick and claimed that in 2014, Westwick had attacked her at his home after a gathering. Wynn said that she then told her boyfriend, who was also an actor, about the incident, but her boyfriend dismissed her claims. A third woman also in November 2017 came forward about Westwick. Rachel Eck, who was a former creative producer, alleged that Westwick tried to forcibly kiss and grope her at a Hollywood hotel in 2014. She claimed that the incident occurred late at night when she was waiting for her boyfriend at the hotel. Westwick responded to all of the allegations and denied all of them, stating that he had never forced himself on anyone, and he claimed that he didn't even know Christina Cohen and said he would work with authorities to clear his name. The Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation into the accusations in late 2017, but in July 2018, prosecutors announced that Westwick would not face charges due to insufficient evidence. And of course, it's important to remember that so many sexual cases don't even make it to being reported, and a lot of other ones are not charged because of insufficient evidence, because it is something so difficult to have evidence for. And also, even if it is reported, even if someone is charged and makes it to court, it is incredibly, incredibly rare that someone will actually be found guilty and then actually have some sort of consequences. And of course, so many sexual assaults don't even get reported in the first place. Due to the allegations, Westwick was removed from the BBC series Ordeal by Innocence, and his scenes were reshot with another actor. He was also dropped from the series White Gold during the investigation. After the case was closed, he did slowly return to acting, but has not done anything anywhere close to Gossip Girl and the fame he achieved through that show. He did go away from social media for 2 years when all of these allegations were coming out, but after 2 years he returned to social media just like nothing happened, and he started doing a lot of TikToks and kind of really playing into his character and Gossip Girl. And of course, younger people are always discovering the show, and it's on Netflix and things like that, so people are always rewatching it. And now a whole new audience of people are finding him on TikTok and following him, and he does do a lot of content centered around Gossip Girl. Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley were always seemingly the most drama-free cast members of Gossip Girl. They have also gone on to both be pretty well liked in the industry. You never really hear about them causing any issues, and they both have gone on to live lives that they seem to want to live and on their terms, while also being successful, which, let me tell you, is not easy in Hollywood. It is not easy mainly because of the way the industry is, and because it is full of scummy people, cutthroat people, people that will make your life difficult and so on. But it's also hard to have a successful career and maintain a somewhat private life doing what you want, because most people in the industry get completely corrupted by the money and fame. I'm not saying either of them are perfect angels or have a perfect life. I'm sure, like everyone, they have ups and downs and flaws and fights. But for Hollywood actors, they both seem more interested in actually doing their jobs rather than creating headlines and getting famous for being famous. I've mentioned this before, but if you look at something like billionaires, most of them are horrendous people because you can't get to that level of wealth without being a ruthless prick who stands on people and backstabs people. And in that same way, the vast majority of Hollywood actors aren't that great or even really halfway decent people. Some of these actors might start out as regular people, like Leighton Meester actually had a very difficult upbringing. But when you're not only given huge amounts of money, power, and fame, but also an army of people doing everything for you, you don't have to wait in line, do errands, do any sort of regular people things. And on top of that, you're told every single day by millions of people, you're perfect, you never do anything wrong. And even if you do something wrong, a lot of the time, fans will make excuses for you or blatantly just not even care what you did. That sort of situation is going to corrupt most people. But Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley seemingly were the easiest of the Gossip Girl cast to work with. They also have both gone on to pretty unproblematic careers. And most fans of Gossip Girl agree that they both were the most talented actors on the show too. Leighton Meester did have a very difficult childhood, and she did end up in court with her mother, as her mother was trying to get her to be financially responsible for her brother, who suffers from a pretty serious health condition. And of course, the mother lost. And it was something that I don't really think it's appropriate to sort of go into a lot of like childhood stuff and with the brother and things, who's like not a public figure, but there are plenty of articles on the legal aspects of all of that. But Leighton Meester also went through a lot with her parents because her mom and her don't speak, and her mom is speaking to the press, not so much anymore, but she did when all of this legal stuff was going on. And it came out through all of this that Leighton Meester was actually born in prison when her parents were locked up for dealing substances. She does have two siblings, and as I said, one has a pretty serious health condition. And when Leighton was a child, she seems to have been parentified and took on a lot of responsibilities in her family, one of which was the financial responsibility, as at a young age, she started working to support her family financially. Leighton moved to New York when she was 11 from Texas and started modeling, and 2 years later, she started appearing on television, with her first role being in Law and Order. From 1999 to 2006, she appeared in various TV shows, and some of them were even on her future home of the CW. She was in shows like Veronica Mars and Seventh Heaven. When Leighton was cast in Gossip Girl in 2007, it definitely was her big break as a regular on a TV show, but with Gossip Girl going on to be such a huge show, Leighton really hit the jackpot with that. As I said, she and Penn were always lauded by fans as the most talented, but while Penn's character of Dan wasn't really that well liked by later seasons of the show, and honestly it became an even bigger mess when he was revealed to be Gossip Girl, as that kind of tainted people's rewatch of the show because it didn't make sense. But Leighton's character of Blair Waldorf was really adored, and being in my late teens and early 20s when the show came out, I'd absolutely say that while yes, Blake Lively was promoted as the star, but I think the vast majority of people seemed far more interested in Blair and Leighton Meester. As is usually the case with these big shows, especially CW ones, where there's multiple female leads, Leighton and Blake were pitted against each other right from the start. But there was also this avalanche of reports from the set that they had this feud and really didn't get along. Their feud was talked about constantly, and while it seems as though they definitely didn't get on, it seems like it was much more a case of two people who were not similar, didn't have a lot in common, came from very different backgrounds, and were just co-workers. A lot of the time, fans of the show want the real life actors to have the same friendships and relationships that they do on screen. And this is especially true for TV because it isn't just an hour and a half movie in a movie theater, which, don't get me wrong, like, people feel very passionately about movie characters and relationships, but TV, in my opinion, just has this other level to it. And some of that might be because I feel so strongly about TV. I mean, I've literally made my life talking about TV pretty much, but you are with these characters for years and years, and you know the characters so well. You see their ups and downs and breakups and makeups, their best moments and their worst, and you invite them into your home week after week for years. And if it's your favorite show or your comfort show, you watch it again and again and again. Any girlies with anxiety and or ADHD, let me know in the comments what is the show you watch over and over and over and over again, or to fall asleep to. People feel really passionately about TV characters and their relationships, and this is especially true for CW, WB type shows, as they're aimed at younger fans, and younger fans are some of the most loyal fans you can have. The CW absolutely knows this. They know how to get people interested and talking about those shows, as they aren't one of the big three main networks. As I mentioned earlier, the CW loves when the cast date each other. They love writing in their cast's real life personal dramas into the show, and they also know the cast being best friends is something that generates a lot of discussion. But what generates even more buzz and articles is when cast don't get along. You only need to look up anything about Gossip Girl, and every single article and video practically talks about this feud between Blake Lively and Leighton Meester. I'm sure there was a lot of jealousy and petty behavior, considering they were all 19, 20, 21 through the first seasons, under a microscope, lots of money, and all the other things that come with it.
Yeah, there was an article recently saying that Leighton and I were frenemies. Friends, but we're also enemies. And they see our characters on the show, and they want that to be true in a sense. And it's really strange because they always want to pit women against each other. You don't hear about, like, Penn and Chase hating each other, but, you know, we all do get along very well. And it's upsetting that they have to do that to try to sell magazines.
Although the feud aspect was discussed a lot in the media and printed a lot in magazines, there does seem to be a lot of reports from the set, from people who worked on the show and crew and other minor actors, that said it was much more two people who just weren't friends, were never going to be friends, and were co-workers and really nothing more. Especially by the end of Gossip Girl's run, a lot of the cast were very, very checked out from the show. I've talked before a little bit about TV contracts, especially in some of my WB CW videos, because the CW is known for getting young unknown actors and locking them into these contracts for many years. And you get to this stage where the actors really want out of the show, especially because a lot of them sign these contracts when they're young and unknown, but they have to see it through until the end of the contract. The CW usually signs actors to a 6-year deal. Occasionally, lately, I've heard that they're even doing 7 years. In California, they can't really do anything longer than 7. I know a lot of their shows film outside California, but I'm not sure where they use as like their base for the contracts. It is why many CW shows, including Gossip Girl, end after 6 seasons. There are, of course, exceptions. Supernatural ran for like 15 years, I think, but a lot of it hinges on the actors and if they're willing to renegotiate or sign on for longer, because a lot of these CW shows, if they're still getting decent numbers and the actors are willing to stay on, they'll just still keep pumping out the show. So some of these CW actors, they'll sign on for a show and it will become really popular, but they might want to leave the show after the 3rd season, but they're locked in for 6. So by the time it gets to the 5th or 6th season, they are really unhappy and pretty much checked out of the show. It'll come to the point where the actors literally are not even really aware of what is happening on the show. They just know, I need to come in today at this time, stand on my mark, say my lines, and I'm out. And the second that they're done, it's erased from their mind. Like they couldn't even tell you what's happening on the show. Some actors worked like this in general, but by the end of Gossip Girl, this was allegedly the case for pretty much the whole cast. It was come in, hit your mark, find your light, say your lines, go home. So honestly, now when people are going to the people like Michelle Trachtenberg and the rest of the Gossip Girl cast and asking them to make statements about everything going on at the moment with Blake Lively, it's no wonder they're replying with, what the fuck, why would I do that? They work together as nothing more than co-workers in their late teens and early 20s, nearly 20 years ago. Why would they make a statement? They have absolutely nothing to gain from that and a lot to lose, because at the moment, there's nothing that you can say in that situation that isn't going to have a lot of people coming after you. The Gossip Girl cast are around my age, like a year or two older than me, and I can think of a lot of my friends that if you went and spoke to their coworkers from their job when they were 19, 20, you might get a completely different opinion of them than if you spoke to their coworkers today. If you spoke to my coworkers from my teens and early 20s when I worked at like American Eagle and a bar, they'd still tell you I was obsessive about my work and working crazy hours. But a lot of people, the way they behave at work can be totally different today than it was 20 years ago. And a lot of that depends on the type of person and their life and experience. And I've had a job since I was like 13. I'm the oldest, and lots of other factors that I had to grow up very quickly. But some people, their first job, it can be a completely different experience. And 20 years later, they could be a great employee. And you can apply the same sort of thing to people working on a show when they were a teenager and people that are close to 40 today. I don't think that really Michelle Trachtenberg has much to say on, one, the situation with Blake Lively right now, because, as I said, anything that she says is just going to be picked apart, and there's nothing that she could say that would be a good move for her. But also, she probably hasn't seen Blake Lively or had anything to do with her in nearly 20 years. So I just don't think there's much that the Gossip Girl cast can contribute now, because it seems clear that Blake Lively doesn't have relationships with any of them, and most of them don't seem to have any relationships with each other really at all. When Leighton Meester was on Gossip Girl, as I said, there was this push at a very specific period to kind of make her a pop star, and there was a lot of resources and money put behind this, but it was a bit of a blip. And this was around 2009. She released her first single, Somebody to Love, featuring Robin Thicke, and then her second song, Good Girls Gone Bad. That actually did pretty well. It peaked at number 7 in the US charts. But after that song came out, things took a bit of a turn and it didn't go very well. And she actually ended up recording a whole album that never came out. But in 2014, the year after Gossip Girl ended, she did end up putting out her own album, Heartstrings, not the one that she re-recorded. That one's never been released. And she ended up releasing this on her own label. And I'm not a very big music person at all, but I know a lot of people have had good things to say about this album, and it did get get pretty decent reviews from what I saw. There was a period the few years before Gossip Girl ended and the few years after it did where she started doing big movies like The Roommate and That's My Boy. The year after Gossip Girl ended, she also got engaged to Adam Brody, Seth from the OC. So it's kind of funny they both worked on shows that were super famous and created by Josh Schwartz and came out within, a year of each other. They got married the following year in February 2014 in a private ceremony, and they had their first child the next year in 2015. They also had a second child in 2020. Around when Leighton was having her kids, she seemed to take a step back from things, and recently she has done a couple of projects, The Weekend Away for Netflix in 2022 and the Apple series The Buccaneers in 2023. But she and Adam Brody seem to be living their best life and doing occasional projects when they want to, but they're still pretty private, which good for them. Sadly, they were victims of the LA fires and their house was completely destroyed by the fires. But this did lead to a lot of their fans supporting them by rallying to watch their shows, stream them, and also stream a lot of Leighton's music, which has caused a resurgence of her songs recently across various platforms. PENN actually seems to have made even more of an effort to stay out of the mainstream media and keep things private than even Leighton Meester. And most of what you hear about him or see about him is through his own podcast. Penn Badgley, like Blake Lively, initially turned down his role on Gossip Girl and was hesitant to take it even after he'd gone through some convincing. Prior to Gossip Girl, he'd done some voiceover work for games that came from Nintendo, a couple of Mario games, and appeared on shows like The Young and the Restless and The Bedford Diaries. The year before Gossip Girl, he was in a movie, John Tucker Must Die, with Sophia Bush of One Tree Hill, which I have a video about the behind-the-scenes antics of One Tree Hill. Penn Badgley played Scott Tucker, the title character's brother, and his brother, John Tucker, was played by Jesse Metcalfe from Desperate Housewives, which, as I mentioned earlier, I also just did a video on Desperate Housewives behind-the-scenes antics too. Penn and Blake Lively didn't get on initially, and they did know each other before Gossip Girl. Allegedly, they were in some homeschooling together, and Blake Lively actually has spoken about not wanting to like Penn Badgley and speaking poorly about him to other cast members when Gossip Girl first started. But things changed quickly, and Penn and Blake actually began dating. They dated from 2007, like the first season of Gossip Girl, until 2009.
Do you currently have a boyfriend?
See, I don't really like to, if I was doing another job, let's say I was a CEO at a big company, right. you don't bring your personal life to the table, right? You come, you do your job, and you separate the two. Right. If not, people really get into your personal life, and you see all these people out there in these magazines that have opened the doors for that. So they bring them on a red carpet or talk about their life, exactly. And you've invited people in, so you can't expect them not to be in your life.
Right. Both were pretty private about their relationship. Well, that's what they say in interviews. They did end up announcing their relationship in May 2008 when they were on hiatus from Gossip Girl between season 1 and season 2. I shouldn't really say announce, because if you look this story up, it was a story in People talking about how they were in a relationship because the paparazzi caught them together in Mexico, which it's like the most clearly staged paparazzi walk, shoot, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever seen. But they broke up quickly after that. They really didn't date that long. When they broke up, the cast, crew, and producers of Gossip Girl were actually none the wiser that they did break up, and they didn't find out until the season 2 finale that they broke up months before that. According to like People magazine, and if you look up, online, like when did they date, it says they dated 2007 to 2010, and People did have it confirmed by their reps that they were broken up in October 2010, but they actually split way, way before that. They broke up at least the year before in 2009 when the season 2 finale was being filmed, but obviously those quotes didn't come out till years later. That year, 2009 and 2010, Blake had been filming The Town with Ben Affleck, and there's always been rumors that Blake Lively and Ben Affleck were together. There was a rumor that Jennifer Garner actually came down to the set of The Town after hearing whisperings, but obviously those are allegations. I used to love the show Alias that Jennifer Garner was on, and she has a super interesting career and public persona because a lot of people see her as this like very straight-laced kind of long-suffering wife of Ben Affleck, and she was raised in a household that was, I believe, very conservative with like dress and hair and women in general just being like very seen and not heard. But she has always dated and married these kind of like bad boy men, and the same way that Ben Affleck has always been rumored to start relationships with women while he's already in a relationship with women, Jennifer Garner has allegedly a similar pattern that also happened with Ben Affleck when they were making Daredevil, and she was married to Scott Foley. Whoever does Jennifer Garner's PR does a very good job, and I think there's a super interesting video to be done about Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck and like all the people surrounding them, like the Blake Lively's and Scott Foley's, and there was a thing with Michael Vartan. He was in between Scott Foley and Ben Affleck, but a lot of the things that are talked about Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, why I think it would be an interesting video is because so much of the stuff about them doesn't actually circulate in the mainstream media and isn't that talked about. But let me know if that's a video you'd be interested in. One like silly thing about Blake Lively and Ben Affleck that is kind of interesting is if you look into their blind items, there's kind of this story that exists over the years from like way back in 2010, and it's sort of this like story about them being kind of star-crossed lovers and like always longing for each other when they're, you know, at like the Golden Globes or something and like staring across the room. But as I always say, like blind items, you kind of have to take with a pinch of salt. Some are absolutely true, some are absolutely false. So who knows with that one. And obviously much more about Blake Lively when we get to her chapter. So as I said, most places were reporting they dated from 2007 to 2010, but it seems much more like they broke up early 2009 or even the end of 2008. Penn did go on to date Zoe Kravitz for several years. He's done some good movies. A favorite of mine is Easy A, great movie. Like LEIGHTON, Penn has been involved in music too. He fronts a band called Mother, and they released an album called Centerfold. As I mentioned, he also has a podcast, and he's had several former Gossip Girl cast members on to talk about the show and reminisce and just their time on a big show like that. In 2014, he began dating Domino Kirk, and they got married in 2017 and had their first child in 2020. Last year, Penn was also in Ariana Grande's music video, The Boy Is Mine, but his biggest role by far, which eclipses even Gossip Girl, is his role as Joe Goldberg on the hit Netflix show You. You premiered its first season in 2018, and just last month, they premiered the teaser for the first half of the 5th and final season, and that will be out later this year, 2025. The show is about a book manager, Joe, who becomes infatuated with a woman and begins stalking and tracking her. It's a good show, and just like Gossip Girl, it's also based on a book series. Obviously, right now, Blake Lively is one of the most talked about topics on the internet. It actually was kind of difficult, like more difficult than usual, to do research for this video because of the sheer amount of articles and videos and posts and just content regarding the situation that's going on with Blake Lively right now. I will touch on that topic at the end because I think there is a lot more going on here than most people are talking about or that's being put out there. I think that this is such a huge hot topic right now that views, clicks, likes, overall engagement, and therefore money is also something that's very much affecting things and what's being put out and how much is being put out. But I will speak about that later because there just are a few important things to keep in mind. So for some background on Blake Lively, she was actually born Blake Brown, and as I mentioned earlier, she was born into an acting family. Her mother was married previously to Ronald Lively, and while Elaine, her mother, and Ronald were married, they had 3 children, one of which is the actress Robin Lively that I mentioned, who was in Savannah, the WB show, and in Teen Witch, and she was also involved in the movie It Ends With Us, which, as I said, we'll talk about in a minute. But Robin has 2 other siblings, Lori and Jason, who are also actors. When Elaine and Ronald got divorced, Elaine then married Ernie Lively, who is Blake Lively's father. And you might be thinking, Lively, what are the odds of Blake Lively's mom marrying 2 men that last name is Lively? But Ernie's name isn't actually Lively, it's Ernie Brown, but when he and Elaine got married, he decided to become a Lively because Elaine wanted to have the same last name as her 3 kids, and then she and Ernie had 2 more kids, Blake and her brother Eric. Their birth certificates actually do say Brown, but they've always been Lively. I did see like an interview because I was looking into all the Blake Lively interviews. I spent days and days watching these things, but in one of the interviews, it was like with Ryan Reynolds, and they were talking about how when they got married was pretty much, or even it was maybe a little bit after they got married, that is when he found out that Lively wasn't actually technically her real last name. So that's how little that I guess she doesn't even go by it at all. And I'm sure a lot of people have put together that is why her hair care line is called Blake Brown. Her brother, Eric Lively, is also an actor, and my OG subscribers from my OG channel, all my L Word girlies, will recognize Eric Lively as he is a series regular in season 2 of the L Word, playing a very creepy roommate named Mark. Blake's dad, Ernie, was an actor himself, and her mom was a talent scout, and with her siblings also being actors, Blake spent a lot of time on sets when she was growing up. Her first ever acting role was in a lead role in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and her real life dad actually plays her dad in that movie and the sequel too. I think this movie is even where you can see Blake kind of developing this other factor. I don't even know really what to call it, because if you look at the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants movies, there's the 4 leads, America Ferrera, Amber Tamblyn, and Alexis Bledel, and Blake Lively, and all of the actresses except for Blake were coming off or involved in pretty significant other projects, and this was Blake's first ever role, and she definitely got the most out of this movie, like attention and career-wise. And while she has gone on to do shows like Gossip Girl, that was like a cultural phenomenon at the time, and other movies like Green Lantern, The Town, and all the stuff that's going on now, A Simple Favor, but it's not as though she's done like massive movies like back to back to back, but she is still a massive star. I know a lot of people like always have this discrepancy about A-list and who's this, who's that. I usually go off name recognition. Like, I think if you showed her picture to 100 people in the street, I think the vast majority of them would be able to tell you her name. And certainly, like, I am practically like the exact same age as Blake Lively. When I think of who all my straight friends like really love, Blake Lively is one of those actresses that if I ask them, what's your favorite Blake Lively movie? What's one of her amazing performances? I don't know whether like right off the top of their head they'd be able to say. They'd probably saying Gossip Girl because it would be the first thing that come to mind. But I feel like a lot of my friends, and this is anecdotal evidence obviously, are going off like her more as a red carpet, interview, magazine, fashion person. And that's why sometimes I think Blake Lively is either someone who was ahead of her time, and don't take that in the wrong way, I'm not saying she's like some sort of genius, or she was someone who, because of the family she was born into, she kind of went into acting. And she does talk all the time in interviews about how she never wanted to be an actor, and basically her brother said, oh, I think you'd be good at it, and she did it. And growing up, that seems to have been what she was mainly exposed to.
Growing up around it made me not want to do it. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living, but I knew it wasn't acting. But then my brother thought I would love it, and I started doing it, and I did love it. And so it's never, I don't know, it's never really been, the only thing that I learned growing up on sets was how great craft service was.
And I just think that she should have never been an actor. She doesn't seem to like the same things about it that actors do.
Gossip Girl, so she was driving down at nights and back and forth and really stretching it to get her research done. And I was driving around the city. So that's the house Matt grew up in. She said, Matt who? And I said, Matt Damon. She goes, how do you know Jason Bourne?
Are you sure she had no idea?
Before my eyes. Yeah. I was like, well, we did a movie together.
These kids today, they don't know their history.
But she seems like someone who should have been some sort of really big influencer or something like that, or a lifestyle person, or have some sort of Netflix cooking and all of that sort of thing. And we will talk about her baked goods in a minute, because there's weird stuff going on with the relationships. But I just don't think that acting is something that she's really that passionate about. Obviously, I don't know her. This is just like my own opinion. And I will keep it brief because it is my opinion. I don't like to put too much of that in. But she just is someone who I think that it's more like the celebrity and the attention. And obviously, you know, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, they aren't just successful actors. Like, they have so many companies, they are worth so much money. And I think it's more the whole like fame celebrity package more than actually being an actor. And I think that if she was maybe 5, 7, even 10 years younger, that she might have in her even teen years started some sort of influencer thing and gone down that path, because she really has like the making of it. Because a lot of those like lifestyle influencers, or just people that become influencers, they do come from rich families, because one, who else can dedicate all that time when they're not making any money, but also being able to have the appearance of money before you have money. Her parents, I'm sure, put her up in nice places before she got her sisterhood and Gossip Girl money. And I'm sure she grew up in a very nice house, and, you know, she went to a really prestigious high school and all of that stuff. So I just think that maybe acting wasn't the route for her. But again, I don't know her, so that's just my opinion. The following year, after Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants in 2006, she did a college movie called Accepted with Justin Long.
I didn't know what I was doing half the time. This is my second movie, and I feel like, okay, I'm an actress, but I have no idea what I'm doing. So on my own level, I feel like my own level of rejection, like I don't belong here, I shouldn't be doing this.
And that same year, she did a horror movie called Simon Says that was starring Crispin Glover, and her dad actually produced that and appears in it too, as do her two sisters, Robin and Laurie. The year after, in 2007, she was of course cast as the lead character Serena van der Woodsen in the CW's Gossip Girl. And as I mentioned earlier, she initially turned down the role. As we talked about earlier, Gossip Girl was a pretty good show the first season, but once the original showrunner and producers departed, it turned into something else. But Gossip Girl really did launch Blake Lively's career into being just a well-known star. And especially coming just a year and a half after the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which was a pretty big movie, especially for like teens and 20-somethings. The Gossip Girl cast was everywhere during this first couple of seasons, and Blake especially started to get a lot of attention for her fashion. And between her individually and the Gossip Girl cast, she seemed to constantly be on magazine covers and being interviewed. I was never someone who was like super drawn to Blake Lively. Like I said, I more preferred Leighton Meester, but she was someone that I always was totally aware of and like what was going on with her from Gossip Girl onwards, because she was someone that was just always talked about. And even late night shows and interviews, lots of magazine covers, and she became very well known for not having a stylist and dressing herself. And over the years, she became this kind of red carpet look darling and developed a pretty big following for her fashion. During the end of season 2 of Gossip Girl, the hiatus, and the start of season 3, she started filming the movie The Town with Ben Affleck. And as I said earlier, there were lots of rumors at the time about her and Ben Affleck, but they've never been confirmed. She was also one of the many young actresses who had her explicit pictures stolen and released online, which was horrendous. And going into the 4th season of Gossip Girl, there was a lot of discussion about Blake Lively and pretty much the whole cast of Gossip Girl, honestly, not wanting to continue with the show, but they were locked into their contracts. These CW shows, they not only tie you down for that 6-year contract, but you're filming 10 months of the year. The shoot days are very long, and especially when the writing isn't there and you're part of a big ensemble cast, a lot of the actors can be frustrated. Blake Lively was more interested in the movie scene, and honestly, I think the fashion scene, than ever any acting interests her. But in 2010, she was cast and shot the movie Green Lantern, which became pretty infamous for how bad it was. And that, of course, was alongside her future husband, Ryan Reynolds, who played Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. This movie was hyped up and supposed to be this big deal for DC. They were trying to get their own success, similar to Marvel, as the Avengers was coming out in 2012. So a lot of, Captain America and Iron Man, it was all building towards that. And they really thought Green Lantern was going to kick off this big success for DC. As most people will be aware, the movie was terrible and it got just torn apart by reviews and in the media. Around this time, Blake and Penn Badgley broke up, and that was while she was shooting Green Lantern. And it was also rumored that there was that situation with Affleck around this time. So 2010 was when Green Lantern was shot, and then it came out the following year in 2011. And that was when Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively had to do all the press and Comic-Con and interviews. And this was right after The Town when it came out in 2010. So the Ben Affleck rumors had been around. She had broken up with Penn Badgley that year before, and Ryan Reynolds, while they were shooting Green Lantern, was married to Scarlett Johansson. And neither Scarlett nor Ryan has ever gone into like a ton of detail about their marriage breaking down, but Scarlett has mentioned a few things and made the odd comment that seems to indicate Reynolds may not have been too thrilled about how big of a star Scarlett was becoming, as at this time she was in the Marvel Universe and shooting Avengers. Ryan and Scarlett got divorced in 2011, the year Green Lantern came out and when they were doing all the press. And Blake Lively was dating Leonardo DiCaprio at this time, and they broke up right around the same time that Reynolds and Scarlett Johansson divorced. When Green Lantern came out, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were obviously doing all of these press things together, and they did even talk about the chemistry that they had in a lot of the interviews. A year after this is when they claim they got together, and they did the usual PR speak of, oh, we met and then we were great friends for a year and then we got together. It does seem like they are a real Hollywood relationship and not PR, which is honestly not super common. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but it happens. Well, PR relationships happen a lot more than people think. And Ryan and Blake got married the year after they got together in 2012. That was the year after Green Lantern's release. Their wedding was extremely controversial when the pictures came out, especially as they got married on a plantation, which I honestly don't know what they were thinking. There was such backlash that the vast majority of their wedding pictures have been completely scrubbed from the internet. I think the only place you can see them is on Martha Stewart's site because she didn't want to take them down. And they did issue an apology when all of this started coming out. They spoke about how they specifically saw like beautiful locations on Pinterest and how, you know, they made a mistake and all of this stuff. And actually, because they kept specifically saying that they saw pictures on Pinterest, Pinterest changed how they do a lot of wedding stuff, and they don't even allow plantations to post location pictures anymore on the app because of all this backlash. Ryan and Blake have 4 children together, and they are very private about their kids. I don't like discussing people's kids like at all. I never have, even on my original channel. If I do ever have to show like a relevant picture, I will blur the kids' faces, but I prefer just not even to like talk about them. They did kind of have this same policy where they didn't discuss the kids, they didn't talk about their names, they didn't show their pictures, nothing. But then whenever Ryan got his star on the Walk of Fame, they did like a big photo shoot, like the typical Walk of Fame pictures where, you know, it's like a big day and they have the ceremony. I do see this very differently to Ashton and Mila, for example, who recently showed their kids. They showed their kids' faces because they were going through like massive backlash for being best friends with Danny Masterson and writing him a letter of support after he was convicted of multiple violent rapes. And they got even more backlash when everything came out about their other best friend, Diddy. That was the moment that Ashton and Mila chose to show their kids' faces that they said they would never do. And they said, you know, their kids' privacy wasn't theirs to give away, but when they got into major controversy, they did. And not only did they show their faces, they did like lots of publicity around it and brought to them to all these events. I do see Ashton and Mila and Blake and Ryan, like that is a different thing because theirs was like a celebration. It was one day. Yes, the kids were in pictures, but it wasn't the way Ashton and Mila, like everything was centered around the kids. There was even articles being like, they show their faces, like face reveal and all this stuff. And they went to all these like very public events with lots of people around and then did a slew of articles afterwards too. But if you want to know any more about Ashton and Mila or Masterson or Sean Combs, anything like that, I have plenty of videos on the topics. Nobody even knew their kids' names, and they actually were announced in a very big way because they were included in a Taylor Swift song, and they afterwards said, yes, like these are the kids' names. That's why, because Taylor Swift is some of the kids' godparents, and she is like very close to Ryan and Blake. Blake and Taylor are like best friends, so that's how their names were included. One story that has always existed about Blake and Ryan's marriage is that allegedly Ryan is quite controlling of Blake and isn't that keen about her doing tons of projects. And to be fair, she really hasn't done a lot of projects since she married Ryan Reynolds. And for someone who that seemed to be what they wanted was the whole celebrity life and thing, it doesn't quite add up. But she has had 4 kids, so maybe a lot of it is down to that. They do have absolute buckets of money. They have a lot of businesses, so I'm sure that, you know, she doesn't need to do any projects. It's not like, oh, I need to keep up my lifestyle or anything like that. But Blake Lively does seem like someone who liked the whole celebrity life and pictures and red carpets and all of that. So you would think that she would like to be involved in more projects, but it could be the case of doing these drinks and hair care lines and going to the Met Gala and all that stuff. Maybe that is satiating her fine because they have the money. If she wants to go and do red carpet stuff and get pictures taken and do interviews, she can. But it's still, that story has always persisted. And they even have had, like over the years, a few support type staff that have allegedly said that Blake has to pretty much like run everything by Ryan and he kind of doesn't want to be outshone by her. But again, that's alleged. There actually were a lot of reports during the last 2 seasons of Gossip Girl that Reynolds really wanted Lively to leave the show. And there were some attempts to get her out of her contract, but this was nearly 15 years ago. So they didn't have, Ryan and Blake didn't have the same like name recognition or power that they do today. One kind of funny thing is that I've always heard that Blake Lively, whenever, you know, she was starting dating Ryan Reynolds or like Leonardo DiCaprio or pretty much anyone, that she kind of woos them with like baked goods, which if you watch like a ton of their interviews, they do always talk about, oh yeah, like Blake was bringing brownies to me and this to me and all of that stuff. And even when Ryan Reynolds was doing Green Lantern and all this crazy diet, she would like stay up and bake all this stuff.
She's not kidding. She says she'd get off set at 1 in the morning and she'd be back over in New Orleans shooting at 6 a.m. and not a single complaint. In fact, sometimes she'd just come on set having just baked mysteriously and curiously a batch of brownies. It was like, so no sleep at all tonight? Nope. I had to cook these brownies for you that you can't eat, Ryan. Have you seen the suit?
And I tried with all my baked goods to break him, but it didn't work.
It didn't work.
No, we had, you know, the earliest call times and he was up at like 3 in the morning working out. And
anytime I think about that story about her wooing people with baked goods, I just picture her showing up to set in a very 50s style dress with a little picnic basket full of brownies and baked goods. I don't know why that makes me laugh so much, but it does. One other thing I will say that I've always heard about them, and I do know like quite a few people who have worked either on sets with them or have had significant dealings with them, events or some sort of production they've been putting on. I've always heard that they are very nice to staff and fans, and believe me, that is not usual for Hollywood. I do talk about this a lot in my videos, but I don't doubt that 20 years ago, especially during like the Gossip Girl days, I'm sure Blake Lively and the rest of the cast were all probably nightmares. They were 19, 20, 21. You'd like to think that people grow and mature and do start to treat people better, but usually with Hollywood, it goes the complete other direction where people get more famous, more money. They have spent more times on set and having people do everything for them, and they become even bigger monsters usually as their career goes on, especially if they become a bigger and bigger celebrity. And as I spoke about, the Gossip Girl cast certainly were notorious for all of their antics and behavior behind the scenes and feuds and issues. But from what I've always heard, what's always been reported, what even people posting online that they've had fan encounters, they have always been pretty positive up until this summer. Obviously, I'm eliminating the situation with It Ends With Us because I'll get into that later and what I'm going to do regarding that. But the general consensus that was out there for the last at least 8-9 years has been pretty positive for a Hollywood person anyway. Even back when The Town was being filmed, so like 2010, I know someone who worked on that, and they said Blake Lively would spend a ton of time every day taking pictures with fans and signing autographs, talking to people. And this was like in the later seasons of Gossip Girl, and they were actually filming some of The Town while they were filming Gossip Girl. So she was filming Gossip Girl in New York and then having to go between the Town set in Boston. So it was like a lot of driving, and Gossip Girl, I'm sure they were working like 17, 18-hour days some of the time, and she was probably shooting The Town on like the weekends or something. So that going back and forth, and you're filming two things at the same time and you're still making time for people, I mean, that's not usual. Obviously, when I make these videos, I like to include absolutely everything in the sources that I've used to make the video, apart from things like that where it's someone telling me something. But the people that I use are people that I have known for years and years and years, and have 100 other things that they've told me that I know, like I can back up or they can back up. And the vast majority always want to be anonymous because they still work in the industry. And anything like the situation with Desperate Housewives, where someone from Desperate Housewives reached out to me, if I don't know them personally, I will always more than vet them. Like the person with Desperate Housewives, they not only gave me their full name, their job title, I could find them on IMDb. They showed me more than enough proof that they were who they said they were. And also I got on video with them and could see their face and match it with IMDb and all that stuff, because I know there's a lot of stuff like that going on with It Ends With Us, and I always do want to be able to give every single source, and I'd love my friends or people I know to sit and say it on camera, but they still work in the industry, and it's, of course, people want to be anonymous because it doesn't look good coming on YouTube and like spilling secrets, but that's why I only ever really include small chunks of that stuff, because everything else I'll always put in the sources. And I did find that there was this video from, or there's actually multiple videos from an autograph hunter. And in case you don't know, there's a lot of people that will like sell autographs online, and they will find where certain celebrities are going to be. So say somebody's going to tape The View, or there's a movie premiere, they'll go and get the person's autograph and they'll sell them. And lots of them will like bring, you know, like glossy pictures. So say it's Blake Lively, they'll bring like headshots of Blake Lively to sign. And a lot of them, what they've started doing is they'll print out like the first page of a script and get them to sign it. Or they'll even get white index cards or like sheets of just like white paper. And a lot of actors have like caught on to this. So if they see like a stack of pictures or they see white index cards, a lot of them won't sign. And of course, like a lot of them even become, maybe not the actors, but like their PR people will become familiar with these autograph hunters. And so like sometimes the handlers or like security or PR person will be like, no, we're not signing. This particular autograph hunter, he has a couple of videos with Blake, and not only does she like come up to him and signs like multiple things for him, she goes back multiple times and signs stuff for him, which that is very rare, especially when actors like see the white cards.
How you been, Blake? Black Radio Man here, Black Radio Man.
Blake.
How you been?
Why you're signing, Blake? Blake, why
I'm the Black Radio Man. Blakey with the cakey. How you been, girl? All right.
Blake, one last shot right here.
How you been?
Good, what about
All right. Been maintaining, still living. All right. Mind doing a few more? Thank you, publicist. Thank you, publicist.
You're very welcome,
Thank you.
sir.
All right, stay black, everyone. Have a wonderful morning. All right, you all ready?
But she also remembers this guy and asks him like, oh, how he is. And they have like a little back and forth. And I know people will say like, oh, wow, she's being a decent human being a few times, like big deal, or, you know, it's only a few videos. But I'm telling you, this is far from the norm. I'd say half of actors, maybe even more, when you're talking about A-list or like people that are really well known, wouldn't even go out. So a lot of places, like if they're taping the Drew Barrymore show or The View or something, a lot of them will drive in so that they're like in the building already, so the fans or like autograph people can't get to them, or, you know, there's paparazzi and everything. Or a lot of them will just like walk straight through. Some of them will sign, but it will be like stone faced, just like, you know, with the Sharpie. And you can usually tell the actors that will always sign and always take pictures, because they will always like have like their own Sharpies, because they don't want to like, you know, be taking like tons of people's different Sharpies. And I've seen loads of cases where like someone will accidentally like take someone's Sharpie and go off with it and things. So anytime that I do see Blake Lively signing anything, she always does have like Sharpies, and like her PR person does. And I know this is based on a few people's interaction. You're seeing a few videos. I'm telling you about a few people who have interactions with them, and it could all be fake. They could be awful people that the second that they're away from cameras, like the mask drops. And honestly, that's the case with a lot of Hollywood people. I've seen people be absolute monsters, and then you go online and someone's like, oh, they seem like such a sweetheart, and yeah, sure. But they are at least nice to staff and fans, which goes a long way in Hollywood, because, as I said, that's not the norm. We talked about the wedding backlash already, but after Gossip Girl wrapped, I'd say the other bits of backlash and criticism that she garnered was for her comments about both Woody Allen and Harvey Weinstein, who she had working relationships with both. Woody Allen, she did a movie with him and Parker Posey, and she obviously was very complimentary to him and didn't acknowledge what has gone on with his daughter and everything else that he's done. And with Harvey Weinstein, she ended up saying that she hadn't had that experience with him and she was devastated to hear the stories and that she never heard anything about him. I do find it very hard to believe when really big celebrities will say, oh, I never heard anything about Harvey Weinstein, because how do normal people who are nobodies hear this stuff for years? And I'm not saying like anybody should have known or anything like that, but when celebrities are blatantly saying to the press they never heard anything, it doesn't add up to me. It's like Ashton Kutcher and Danny Masterson. And we are thinking about it in the same way that normal people can totally be friends with a monster and not know anything. That happens all the time. And you find something out about someone that you never would have thought in a million years. But these people are extremely famous. And that stuff, like, it's constantly circulating. And that the Diddy stuff, even if you go back and look at like my videos being released, like you can see I released Ashton and Mila like the day before Diddy was arrested, and certain things like that, because people talk and these things are known, even if it's not being discussed openly in the press and places like that. We do know now there's been so many people that have come out in the industry and said, yes, this was known. This was very talked about, just the same way that people discuss Diddy and Danny Masterson. And you can even go back now and look at old videos, old podcasts, old forum posts, and see people discussing what monsters Danny Masterson, Harvey Weinstein, and Sean Combs were years before anything officially happened and came out in the mainstream media. The biggest project that Blake has had recently, apart from the It Ends With Us stuff, is the movie A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick. The sequel to this movie is coming out this year, and there were reports from the set that Blake Lively and Anna Kendrick did not get on, which is probably true, but it couldn't have been that bad since they are both doing the sequel, and it isn't like either of them are desperate for money or a job. If it really was that miserable, I'm sure they both wouldn't have signed on, or one of them wouldn't have signed on. Also, it pains me to say that from everything I've heard, allegedly Anna Kendrick isn't that easy to deal with either. And a lot of people lately have been discussing the movie poster for A Simple Favor 2, as it just came out like a week ago. And it's the name placement that most people are talking about. On the poster, it has Anna Kendrick's name first and then Blake Lively's name, but Blake Lively's name is sitting like a little bit above Kendrick's on the right side. This is not unusual at all. It's very common if they want to give two actors equal billing. It's basically the way that they're trying to say they're both the stars. And I do talk about stuff like this in a lot of my videos, things like credits and, in the Charmed show, how they were using the credits to kind of like appease people sometimes, because when Shannon Doherty left, they gave the lead spot to Alyssa Milano, but they were blackmailing Holly Marie Combs to keep her on the show. So they gave her and Holly Marie Combs as Piper. They call that the trailer usually in credits. It normally appears at the end. So, for example, in Buffy, you had and Anthony Stewart Head as Giles. When he left the show, the next biggest star, Alison Hannigan, she got that spot. And if you look at a show like Yellow Jackets, which I cover now on my original channel, I do actually plan on talking about the Yellow Jackets credits this week, because there is something that I think is indicating what's going to happen with Hilary Swank in the credits. But if you want to watch that and you like Yellow Jackets, I'll link my original channel below. That show's cast is amazing, but they also have 3 like pretty well-known actresses. So they wanted to give them all equal billing. And so in the Yellow Jackets credits, it's quite unusual. You don't see this tons in TV shows. They have Melanie Linsky in the top spot. She's the first one. And then at the end, they have with Christina Ricci, followed by and Juliette Lewis. So it's the same thing with movies. I mean, you look at the Avengers poster and they have so many people in it, and obviously like loads of very, very well-known A-listers. And it's why a lot of the time, even people that aren't in a movie ton will like still be on the poster, or I mean, movies like Scream do it more to like play with the audience, but that is a huge thing. And people might see it as like, oh, it's a name on a poster in the credits, but all of that stuff is decided at the contract stage. Blake and Anna Kendrick probably dealt with that like 2 years ago because it all really matters. It's like the whole number one on the call sheet. You know, if you're going on the set of a TV show, the star is number one on the call sheet. And all of that stuff, it sounds really dumb, but it really means a lot. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet that that equal billing was something that was put into the contract for Blake to say, hey, like come back for the sequel. Because I believe, and I'll asterisk this if I'm wrong, but I believe Anna Kendrick in the first one was given the lead credit and Blake Lively's name followed. So that sort of thing, like I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, she must have muscled her way in on this, or she wanted, you know, to this because so this is going on. But really, like all of that stuff is like done with lawyers and in contracts. So these things really aren't changed like last minute or anything. And I know there's been like a ton of stuff about the It Ends With Us poster and that topic in general. But as I've said in a few other videos, I am working on a video about the whole It Ends With Us and Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. I just am getting through everything. I understand that some people don't have the time to go through every source or every this or every that. And I want to make sure if somebody is coming to my video to find out what's going on, that I'm telling them the full story and giving them everything I possibly can. I did speak about it on my Patreon last month. We did like an 1.5-hour conversation about the whole situation with Baldoni and Lively and celebrity PR in general and stuff that's going on, because as I said, I think there is so much more going on here than people are talking about or realizing, and especially on forums like Reddit and stuff. I am doing a mega deep dive. I am making my way through everything. I'm going through Blake Lively's amended complaint right now because I've gone through pretty much like the rest of the lawsuits and all of the text messages and the website and stuff. But in case you've been living under a rock, last summer in 2024, there was a movie released called It Ends With Us, and it's based on a book by Colleen Hoover. The movie starred Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, and it was also directed and produced by Justin Baldoni and his production company, Wayfair Studios. The movie did pretty well at the box office, but it didn't get the best reviews. And when the film was being marketed and promoted, people began to notice that all of the cast had stopped following Justin Baldoni on social media. What do I always say? The follow, unfollow is usually a pretty good indication about actors' relationships, especially if there was a follow and then they unfollow. Because yes, a lot of people will say, oh, maybe it was an accident, or maybe they just never followed them. But actors know that their whole, oh, who are they following, who are they aren't, they know fans are watching that sort of thing. It's not like you and me that, yeah, you're following your friends and like some celebrities and stuff. They know that, oh, if I'm following this person, it's kind of an endorsement. And especially if they were following someone and then they aren't, they know fans are going to notice that sort of thing. It sends a message, and that sounds a bit like conspiracy, but honestly, any drama that I have ever known about behind the scenes, I will go and see like on Reddit or somewhere like that, and fans are talking about, you know, oh, so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so and they unfollowed them. And there'll always be people like, oh, it could be a mistake or something. And I know that there is drama. And I'm like, no, these people are right. I'm not saying that's every single one, but I could literally list like 50 off the top of my head where there's drama between actors. And one of the first signs was the unfollow. But that sort of thing, it's not going to be baked into a contract. Like, you must follow this person on Instagram. So that's like sometimes the only control that the actor has, because all the other stuff, it'll be like, you're going to promote this movie, you're going to post this on your social media at this time, and you're going to go to this interview and take pictures here. All of that stuff is decided upon, and people noticed all of that unfollowing. They noticed all the cast wasn't mentioning Baldoni. They noticed that there was a lot of negative press and content about Blake over the summer and into the fall, and it just seemed really icy between everyone. And so people started speaking about it on social media. And then on December 20th, 2024, the New York Times dropped a bombshell article with Blake Lively making very serious accusations against Baldoni through this article. Lively claimed that she experienced sexual harassment from Baldoni on the set of It Ends With Us, misconduct, and she also said that he ended up retaliating against her for bringing up this misconduct and sexual harassment, and that he, enabled by his PR, conducted an all-out war and smear campaign against her over the internet and social media. And ever since this New York Times article dropped, there has not been one moment of peace on the internet since. What I will say is, from what I found, there is a lot more going on here with this case. A lot more. And I want to make sure, as I said, I do my due diligence and read everything, look into everything. I have 2 different lawyers that I'm speaking to because I want to make sure that I'm giving the best information that I can. I promise I'll be back very, very soon with a massive, deep dive, thorough discussion about the lawsuit and everything surrounding it. Not the noise. I think there's a lot of noise going on right now that doesn't really pertain to what the lawsuit is actually discussing and the allegations and the whole situation with It Ends With Us. So that is what we'll be discussing. And if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much as always for watching. Leave MVP in the comments so I can personally thank you. And if you haven't guessed yet who the alleged Gossip Girl is, this is your last chance, because allegedly Michelle Trachtenberg, who played the kind of villain Georgina, allegedly she was known for sharing certain secrets from the set and certain information about individuals from the show. And that was a pretty widely reported thing. So let me know what you think about that. If you want to see Miss G again, and maybe me, consider subscribing. In the description box and pinned comment is all of my social media, G's social media, my Patreon, sources, other channels, everything you could possibly need. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, remember to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.